This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I've been putting off sharing this for a long time. Even typing this out makes my hands shake. It happened last summer, and I still haven't driven alone since. I'm not one for supernatural stuff, but what happened that day, I can't explain it. I've tried therapy, medication for the nightmares, even moved to a different state, but I can't outrun these memories. It was mid-July, around 4 p.m., when my car broke down on that godforsaken stretch of road near Salt Creek in the Badlands. I was driving back from visiting my sister in Rapid City when my Toyota, which had never given me problems before, just died. The engine made this awful grinding noise, then nothing. Complete silence except for the wind whistling through those eerie rock formations. I remember checking my phone immediately. No service. Of course. I tried walking up a small hill nearby to get some bars and thankfully managed to get one flickering bar of reception, just enough to call roadside assistance. The operator told me it would be at least 2 hours before anyone could reach me. 2 freaking hours. The Badlands are beautiful in pictures, but when you're stranded there alone, they take on this threatening quality. Those striped rock formations started to look less like natural wonders and more like something watching me. The sun was still up, but it was beginning that slow descent, and I knew I didn't want to be there after dark. I sat in my car with the windows cracked, trying not to panic while scrolling through my phone's downloaded music to distract myself. The heat was oppressive. My AC obviously wasn't working with the car dead. Sweat was trickling down my back, and I kept checking the time every few minutes like it would somehow make help arrive faster. About 40 minutes into my wait, I noticed dust kicking up on the road. Headlights appeared, and this old blue pickup truck pulled up behind my car. I felt this immediate rush of relief. Another person. Help! The truck was beat up, probably from the 90s, with South Dakota plates. The driver stepped out, mid-50s guy with a baseball cap and flannel shirt despite the heat. He had this weathered face, like someone who'd spent his whole life outdoors. He approached my window and gave me what I thought was a friendly smile at the time. "Car trouble?" he asked. His voice was deep but gentle. Something about him reminded me of my uncle, that kind of rural, salt-of-the-earth type. I explained that I'd called roadside assistance, but they wouldn't be there for another hour and a half at least. "That's a long wait in this heat," he said, looking genuinely concerned. "Look, I live just up the road. I've got tools at home that might help. Or at the very least you could wait somewhere cooler while the tow truck comes." I hesitated for a second. Every warning about stranger danger flashed through my mind, but he seemed so normal. Plus, I was literally baking alive in my car. I'd also texted my location to my sister so someone knew where I was, and honestly, being alone out there was starting to really creep me out. "That's really kind of you," I said. "Are you sure it's not too much trouble?" "Not at all. Can't leave someone stranded out here. Name's Roy, by the way." "Megan," I replied. I grabbed my purse and phone, locked my car, which seems silly in retrospect, and climbed into his truck. The inside smelled like cigarettes and some kind of pine air freshener. Country music was playing quietly on the radio. As soon as we pulled away from my car, I felt a twist in my stomach. I chalked it up to anxiety about leaving my vehicle, but looking back, it was my instincts screaming at me. We chatted casually as he drove. He asked where I was from, where I was headed. Normal small talk. I kept expecting him to turn off somewhere close, But we drove for about 10 minutes with nothing but open landscape around us. Then I noticed we weren't heading toward any houses. We were actually going deeper into a part of the Badlands I didn't recognize. "Is your place much further?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just around this bend," he said. But his tone had changed. It was flatter somehow. That's when I noticed his knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel too hard, and he'd stopped looking at me when he spoke. We rounded a curve, and suddenly this building appeared in the distance. Not a house, a church. A small, wooden church that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The white paint was peeling, the steeple was crooked, and there were no other buildings around it. Just this church in the middle of nowhere. My heart dropped into my stomach. "I thought we were going to your house," I said, not bothering to hide my concern now. He didn't answer, just kept driving straight toward that church. I gripped my phone tightly, but when I looked down there were 0 bars again. The truck slowed as we approached the building, gravel crunching under the tires. There was a small dirt parking area with 2 other vehicles, an old station wagon and a black SUV with tinted windows. Neither had license plates. "What is this place?" I demanded, my voice shaking now. Roy turned to look at me, and his face had completely changed. The friendly smile was gone, replaced by this blank expression that chilled me to the bone. "You'll find out," he said simply. I considered jumping out of the moving truck, but we were already slowing to a stop. As soon as he put it in park, I grabbed for the door handle, but he was faster. His hand clamped around my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't make this difficult, Megan," he said, his voice eerily calm. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened to the point of pain. With his other hand, he reached across me and opened the truck door from his side. "Get out," he ordered. I was full-on panicking now, but my brain was also running through options. If I screamed, who would hear me? If I fought, could I overpower him? He was at least twice my size. I decided to comply for the moment, to look for a better opportunity to escape. He got out his side and circled the truck, never letting go of my wrist. When he reached my side, he dragged me out roughly. The heat hit me like a wall as I stumbled onto the dirt. Up close, the church looked even more decrepit. The windows were boarded up, but I could see cracks of light between the boards. The wooden steps leading to the entrance were rotting in places. Roy pulled me toward those steps, and I dug my heels into the dirt, trying to slow him down. "Please," I begged, "please don't do this. Whatever this is, I won't tell anyone. Just let me go." He didn't even look back at me, just kept pulling. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might explode. As we reached the steps, the church door opened from inside. A woman stood there, probably in her 60s, wearing a long dark dress that looked like something from another century. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she had these piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. "You're late," she said to Roy, not even acknowledging me. "Traffic," he replied dryly, as if this was some normal interaction and he wasn't dragging a terrified woman against her will. The woman stepped aside, and Roy pulled me into the church. The smell hit me immediately, musty, like old books and candle wax, with something underneath that turned my stomach. Like copper, like blood. The interior was dimly lit by candles placed throughout the space. The pews had been pushed to the sides, creating an open area in the center where a large symbol was painted on the wooden floor. It looked like a circle with some kind of star inside it, but my eyes couldn't focus properly through my panic. That's when I heard it, the chanting. It was coming from a group of about 8 people standing in a semicircle at the far end of the church. They were all wearing dark clothes, their faces partly shadowed by the dim light. The sound they were making wasn't in any language I recognized, just this low, rhythmic hum that made my skin crawl. Roy dragged me toward them, and I finally snapped out of my shocked state. I twisted violently and kicked him hard in the shin. He grunted in pain, and his grip loosened just enough for me to wrench my arm free. I turned and ran, not toward the door we'd come through, but toward a side door I'd spotted. I could hear Roy cursing and footsteps thundering after me. I reached the door and yanked on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. I spun around, my back against the door, and saw Roy approaching with the older woman not far behind him. The chanting had stopped, and all eyes were on me. "There's nowhere to go," the woman said, her voice oddly gentle, like she was talking to a frightened animal. "Join us willingly, and this will be easier for you." "What do you want from me?" I screamed, my voice breaking. No one answered. They just kept advancing slowly. I darted to my right, running alongside the wall, looking for any exit. That's when I spotted it. A small window at the back of the church, partially boarded up, but with a gap that looked just big enough for someone my size. I changed direction, pushing myself to run faster than I ever had in my life. I could hear them behind me, getting closer. I reached the window and saw that 2 boards had come loose, leaving an opening. Without hesitation, I slammed my elbow into the glass between the boards. Pain shot up my arm as the glass shattered. I cleared away the shards with my sleeve as best I could and started pushing myself through the opening. The jagged edges of glass caught on my clothes, slicing into my side and arms. I felt warm blood running down my skin, but the adrenaline dulled the pain. I was halfway through when I felt hands grabbing at my legs. I kicked wildly and pushed harder, feeling the glass cut deeper. With one final effort, I squeezed through and fell onto the hard ground outside. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the burning pain from my cuts. I could see an arm reaching through the window, trying to grab me, and beyond it, Roy's face contorted with rage. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't think about direction. I just ran as fast as my legs would carry me through the scrubby terrain of the Badlands. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the landscape. My lungs burned and my cuts stung with sweat, but terror kept me moving. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like hours, but was probably only 15 or 20 minutes. Eventually, I reached what seemed like a main road. I collapsed to my knees on the shoulder, gasping for breath, blood soaking through my shirt in several places. A car approached, and I forced myself to stand, waving my arms frantically. It was a minivan with a family inside. They slowed to a stop, and the father rolled down his window, his expression changing from curiosity to alarm when he saw my state. "Help!" I managed to choke out. "Please." They let me into their car, gave me water, and called 911. The mother, a nurse named Janice, wrapped her sweater around my worst cut while they drove me to meet the police and ambulance. When the police arrived, I told them everything through hysterical sobs. They took me to the hospital first, where I got 27 stitches total across 3 different cuts. After I was patched up, I gave my full statement to 2 officers. They sent patrol cars to the location I described, but when they got there, they found nothing. No church, no vehicles, no people, just empty Badlands landscape. They found my car where I'd left it and arranged for it to be towed. They even used the GPS coordinates from my call to roadside assistance to confirm exactly where I'd been picked up. But the church I described, according to them, it didn't exist. They searched for days. I gave them detailed descriptions of Roy, the old woman, everything I could remember. They checked records of abandoned churches in the area. Nothing matched. They even brought in a forensic artist to sketch Roy's face based on my description and circulated it, but no one recognized him. The only evidence that any of it happened were my injuries, which the doctor confirmed were consistent with broken glass cuts and scraps of my bloody clothing that had glass fragments embedded in them. The police eventually classified it as an attempted abduction by unknown perpetrators. They suggested that maybe I'd been taken to a temporary structure, or that I'd become disoriented about the location. But I know what I saw. I know it was real. It's been almost a year now. I still have nightmares where I'm back in that church, except in the dreams, I don't escape. I wake up screaming, feeling phantom hands grabbing at my legs. I've tried researching local cults, old churches in the area, anything that might explain what happened. I've found nothing conclusive. Some local forums mention similar stories. People picked up by friendly strangers near Salt Creek, only to be taken to strange locations that can never be found again. But they're just internet stories, and the police dismiss them as urban legends. All I know is that I'll never drive through the Badlands again. I'll never accept help from a stranger, and sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear that chanting, that inhuman sound that didn't belong in this world. The cuts have healed into scars now, but whatever was in that church, whoever those people were, they're still out there, and sometimes I swear I see Roy's truck in my rearview mirror, following me, waiting for another chance. I was driving back from visiting my cousin in Bakersfield. It was getting late, already dark, maybe around 10 p.m. I don't usually take Highway 166. It's this winding two-lane road that cuts through basically nothing for miles. But there was construction on the main route, and Google Maps suggested this shortcut. Biggest mistake of my life. My gas light had been on for about 20 miles, and that anxious feeling was starting to build in my chest. You know the one, where you're constantly checking the gauge, watching the needle sink lower and lower, doing mental math about how many miles you might have left. The GPS showed a gas station about 5 miles ahead, and I remember feeling relieved. Just a few more minutes, I thought. When I finally saw it in the distance, that relief quickly turned to dread. Even from far away, the place looked wrong. The sign was partially lit. Only the G and S in gas were illuminated, flickering weakly. The building itself was this sad, weathered structure with peeling paint that might have been blue once. One of the windows was completely boarded up, and the others were so dirty you couldn't see inside. I almost kept driving. I really wish I had. But my fuel gauge was now well below empty, the needle practically buried, and the next town was at least 30 miles away, according to my GPS. I didn't have a choice. It was either stop here or risk getting stranded on this pitch-black stretch of highway where I hadn't seen another car for at least 20 minutes. I pulled in, and the gravel crunched under my tires, sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. The fluorescent lights above the pumps buzzed and flickered, casting this sickly glow that made everything look jaundiced and wrong. There was one other car parked at the far end of the lot, an old dark sedan with tinted windows. I couldn't see if anyone was inside. The hair on my arms stood up as I got out of my car. It wasn't particularly cold, but something about the place made me shiver. I walked to the pump, noticing how the metal was rusted and the rubber grip on the handle was worn down to nothing. The price display was cracked and some of the numbers were missing, but it seemed to be working. As I started pumping, I felt watched. You know that sensation, right? Like eyes are boring into the back of your head. I glanced around but didn't see anyone, just shadows shifting at the edges of the light. The pump was agonizingly slow, counting up cents at a time. I kept my eyes on my surroundings, one hand on the pump, the other hovering near my pocket where I keep my keys between my fingers, something my mom taught me years ago. When the pump finally clicked off, I hesitated. I could just drive away. I had enough gas now, but I needed to use the bathroom, and my mouth was dry from the drive. Plus, I'd have to go inside to pay anyway since the card reader on the pump was broken. The door to the station squeaked loudly when I pushed it open. The inside was somehow worse than the outside. Dim fluorescent lights flickering overhead, casting shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. The whole place smelled like stale cigarettes and something else I couldn't identify. Something chemical and sharp. There were maybe 4 aisles of dusty merchandise. Most of the shelves were half empty, and the products that were there looked like they'd been sitting for years. Faded chip bags, dusty candy bars, cans with labels so old the designs weren't current anymore. I grabbed a bottle of water from a refrigerator that was humming so loudly I could feel it in my teeth. When I approached the counter, there was no one there. I cleared my throat and called out a weak, "Hello?" After a moment, a man emerged from a back room. He was thin, almost gaunt, with patchy stubble and eyes that wouldn't stay still. They kept darting around, first to me, then to the door, then to the windows, before returning to me again. His hands trembled slightly as he asked what pump I was on. "Number 3, I said, placing the water on the counter. "And this too, please." He nodded jerkily and punched something into the ancient register. As he did, I noticed dark stains on his fingertips. Oil, maybe, but it didn't look quite right. "That'll be 4738, he said, in a voice that sounded like he hadn't used it in days. I handed him my card, and he swiped it through the machine. It took forever to process, the little screen blinking, connecting, for what felt like an eternity. While waiting, I glanced out the window and froze. There were people outside now, 3, maybe 4 figures in dark hoodies, standing near my car. They hadn't been there when I came in. I couldn't see their faces clearly, just shadowy outlines beneath their hoods. They weren't doing anything, just standing there, watching the station, watching me. My heart started hammering against my ribs. "Who are they?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The attendant didn't look up from the register. "Who?" "Those guys outside, by my car." His eyes flicked to the window, then back to the register. "Don't know what you're talking about, man." The machine finally beeped, and he handed me back my card and receipt. As I reached for them, his sleeve pulled up slightly, revealing what looked like a crude tattoo, some kind of symbol I didn't recognize. "Bathroom?" I asked, my mouth suddenly bone dry despite not having taken a sip of the water yet. He pointed to a door behind me. "Out of order." I turned to look at the door, which had no sign indicating it was broken, then back to him. Something in his expression had changed. His eyes had stopped darting around and were now fixed intently on me. And there was something in them, a gleam that made my stomach turn. "I really need to go," I insisted, not wanting to leave through the front door where those hooded figures were waiting. "I said it's out of order," he repeated, and this time his voice had an edge to it. I nodded and took a step toward the exit, then hesitated. Through the grimy windows, I could see the figures had moved closer to the door. One of them was definitely carrying something long and metallic that caught the light. Panic started to rise in my chest. I looked back at the attendant, who was now watching me with an expression I can only describe as anticipation, like he was waiting for something to happen. "Is there a back door?" I asked, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. The attendant's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile. "Why would you need a back door?" Before I could answer, the front door swung open. Two of the hooded figures stepped inside, and holy shit, their faces. I'll never forget their faces. They were contorted with a kind of rage I've never seen before. Eyes wide and bloodshot, teeth bared. One had a deep scar running from his temple to his jaw. The other had what looked like burn marks covering half his face. They moved toward me with purpose, not rushing but not hesitating either, like they knew I had nowhere to go. "What do you want?" I asked, backing up until I hit a display of motor oil, sending cans clattering to the floor. They didn't answer. The attendant had come out from behind the counter now and was blocking the only other exit. The door he'd claimed was a broken bathroom, but I was now certain led to somewhere else. "Look, just take my wallet, my car, whatever you want," I said, my voice cracking with fear. One of them laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "We already got what we want, right here," he said, gesturing at me with what I now saw was a crowbar. In that moment, I realized with sickening clarity what this place was. Not just a gas station, but a trap. A front for whatever sick operation these people were running. And I'd walked right into it like a fucking idiot. My eyes darted around desperately, looking for anything that might help me. That's when I spotted it. An actual crowbar lying on the floor near the end of the aisle, partially hidden by a stack of newspapers. Must have fallen from somewhere, or maybe belonged to them. I don't know, but it was my only chance. I lunged for it, diving between the aisles as one of the hooded men swung at me, his crowbar whistling through the air where my head had been seconds earlier. My hand closed around the cold metal of the crowbar on the floor, and I swung it wildly behind me as I scrambled to my feet. I felt it connect with something solid, heard a pained grunt. I didn't look back to see who I'd hit or how badly. I just ran, crowbar still clutched in my hand, straight for the front door. The third hooded figure was coming in as I was going out. We collided hard, and I used the momentum to shove him backward, swinging the crowbar again to keep him at bay. He fell back against the fourth guy, and they both tumbled to the ground. I sprinted to my car, fumbling with my keys. Behind me, I could hear shouting, the sound of the station door banging open again. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys, had to bend down to grab them from under the car. I could hear footsteps on the gravel getting closer. Finally, I got the key in the lock, threw open the door, and flung myself inside. I stabbed the key into the ignition, turning it desperately. The engine sputtered once, twice, "Oh God, please," before roaring to life. I slammed it into reverse just as one of the hooded men reached my window, pounding on the glass with his fist. I hit the gas hard, the car lurching backward, tires spitting gravel. Then I shifted to drive and floored it, speeding out of that hellhole as fast as my car could go. In my rear-view mirror, I could see them standing in the lot, watching me go. Not chasing, just watching, like they knew something I didn't. I drove like a maniac, blowing through the one traffic light I hit, not slowing down until I reached the highway that would take me back to civilization. My hands didn't stop shaking for hours. I didn't stop driving until the sun came up. When I finally pulled over at a rest stop hundreds of miles away, I sat there for a long time, trying to process what had happened. I checked my body for injuries and found only a few bruises from the scuffle. I was alive. I'd gotten away. But from what exactly? I called the police once I got home, told them everything. They took my statement, said they'd look into it, called me back 2 days later saying they'd checked out the location I'd given them and found an abandoned gas station that had been closed for years. No sign of recent activity, no attendant, no hooded men, nothing. I've gone over it again and again in my head. I know what I saw. I know what happened. That place was real. Those people were real. The danger was real. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't seen that crowbar, if I hadn't moved when I did. I still have it, actually. The crowbar. It's in my trunk. Sometimes I think I should get rid of it, but it's the only proof I have that any of this actually happened. I don't take rural highways anymore. I don't drive at night if I can help it. And I never ever let my gas tank get below half empty. But the worst part, I still don't know why. Was I just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Was there something specific about me, my car, that made them target me? Or do they do this regularly, luring in desperate travelers who need gas, who have no choice but to stop? How many others have pulled into that station and never made it out? I check the news sometimes, looking for reports of missing persons along that stretch of highway. There are more than you'd think. Way more. And I can't help but wonder how many of them stopped for gas on their way to wherever they were going. And I wonder if someday someone's going to pull into that station just like I did, thinking it's their only option, not knowing what's waiting for them inside. I still can't believe I'm writing this. My hands are shaking even now. I don't know if putting this down will help me process what happened, but I need to get it out of my system somehow. Last Tuesday night, I was driving home from my cousin's place in Henderson. It was around 11:30 p.m., and I had stayed later than I planned after helping her move furniture. We lost track of time catching up. I hadn't seen her in months. Anyway, I was taking the back roads home because there's always construction on the highway, and I just wanted to get home without dealing with lane closures and detours. The road was completely empty, like eerily empty. I remember thinking how strange it was that I hadn't passed another car for at least 15 minutes. It was one of those clear nights where you can see all the stars, and I had my music playing low, just some old playlist I made years ago. I was about 25 minutes from home when I noticed headlights appear in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think anything of it, just another car, right? But then I realized they were getting closer really fast. Within seconds, this car was right on my bumper, high beams blasting through my back window. I couldn't see anything but bright white light filling my mirrors. My heart rate picked up immediately. I've always been nervous about being followed, especially at night. I sped up a little, thinking maybe they'd just pass me. The speed limit was 55 and I pushed it to 65, but they stayed right on me. Then things got worse. The car suddenly swerved into the left lane and pulled up alongside me. I glanced over and saw this beat-up dark sedan with tinted windows. Before I could even process what was happening, the car swerved toward me, forcing me toward the shoulder. I panicked and hit the brakes, trying not to go off the road. The car cut in front of me at an angle, forcing me to stop completely. My tires made this horrible screeching sound as I slammed the brakes. I remember my seatbelt locking up tight against my chest. Before I could even think about what to do next, 3 car doors flew open. 3 people jumped out, all wearing dark clothes and these plastic Halloween-looking masks. One had some kind of hockey mask, another had what looked like a cheap skull mask, and the third wore something that resembled a clown face. But the worst part? They all had weapons. The one with the hockey mask had a baseball bat. The skull mask person had what looked like a crowbar. The clown face was holding what I immediately recognized as a handgun. I froze. Completely froze. You know how people talk about fight or flight? Well, there's also freeze, and that's what happened to me. My brain just shut down for a second. The one with the gun approached my driver's side window and made a motion for me to roll it down. I hesitated, then cracked it about an inch, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. "Wallet, phone, jewelry, now." The voice was male, deep, muffled behind the mask. The other two spread out, one staying near their car, the other moving to the passenger side of my car. I could see them trying to look inside, probably checking if I had other valuables or if anyone was with me. I was alone, completely alone on a dark road with 3 armed people surrounding my car. I don't have much," I stammered, reaching for my purse on the passenger seat with shaking hands. I could feel sweat breaking out all over my body, and my mouth went completely dry. "Hurry the fuck up!" The gun holder smacked the window with the barrel. The sound made me jump so hard I hit my elbow on the steering wheel. That's when some weird clarity hit me. I don't know if it was adrenaline or what, but suddenly I had an idea. I grabbed my wallet from my purse, making sure they could see it through the window. It was this bulky thing with all my cards and about $60 cash inside. Then, with my left hand, I hit the button to lower the passenger window just a crack. "Here, take it," I shouted, and tossed my wallet out the passenger window, away from all of them. It worked exactly like I hoped. They all turned to look at where it landed. The wallet hit the gravel on the shoulder, and some of the cards spilled out. For a split second their attention was divided. I didn't even think. I jammed my foot on the gas pedal and yanked the steering wheel hard to the right, driving partly on the shoulder to get around their car. My engine revved so loud it surprised even me. My tires spun on the gravel before catching the pavement, and my car lurched forward. I heard shouting behind me. In my rearview mirror, I saw them scrambling back toward their car. The one with the gun actually fired a shot, but it went wide. The sound was so loud, like a crack of thunder right next to my ear. I screamed but kept driving. My speedometer hit 80, then 90. I had never driven so fast in my life. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I was hyperventilating, gulping air and trying not to pass out. For about 30 seconds I thought I'd gotten away. The road ahead was empty and dark. But then those headlights appeared in my mirror again. They were following me and gaining. I took a sharp right turn onto another road without slowing down much. My tires squealed and my car felt like it might tip over, but somehow I maintained control. The new road had some gentle curves, and I tried to use them to my advantage, accelerating out of each turn. But they were still behind me, getting closer again. I was coming up on the main highway now, which meant more traffic, more witnesses, more safety. When I hit the on-ramp, there were finally other cars around. I weaved between them, probably driving like a maniac, but I was desperate. I cut across 2 lanes, trying to put as many vehicles between me and them as possible. They followed, driving just as recklessly. At this point, I was sobbing, tears blurring my vision. I kept wiping my eyes with the back of my hand, trying to see clearly. Then came the moment that still gives me nightmares. I checked my rearview mirror and saw the passenger in their car leaning out the window. The streetlights illuminated the gun in their hand. I ducked down as much as I could while still seeing the road. Bang! The first shot hit somewhere on my trunk. Bang! The second one shattered my rear windshield. Glass exploded everywhere. I felt tiny shards hitting the back of my neck and getting caught in my hair. The sound was deafening inside the car, like being inside a drum when someone hits it. I screamed so loud my throat hurt. I was hunched over the steering wheel, trying to make myself as small a target as possible while still driving. My back and shoulders were getting pelted with glass fragments. Some other drivers must have heard the shots because cars around me started swerving away. creating chaos on the highway. Another shot. This one hit my taillight. I could tell because my dashboard suddenly lit up with a warning light. I was crying so hard I could barely see, but I kept driving, weaving through traffic, desperate to get away. Then, like some miracle, I spotted the blue and red lights of a police car up ahead, parked on the shoulder of the highway. Without thinking twice, I swerved across 2 lanes of traffic, horn blaring, and pulled up next to the police car, nearly crashing into it. The 2 officers inside looked startled as I screeched to a halt. I was screaming and pointing behind me, trying to form words through my sobs. I flung my door open and half fell out of my car. "They're shooting at me! They tried to rob me!" I managed to say, pointing wildly back toward the highway. The officers immediately drew their guns, looking past me toward the highway. One grabbed me by the arm and pulled me behind their vehicle, while the other radioed for backup. "Where are they? Which car?" one officer asked, scanning the traffic. I turned to look, expecting to see the dark sedan still pursuing me, but I couldn't spot it anywhere. Somehow they must have seen the police car too and disappeared into traffic or taken an exit. It was a dark sedan, black or navy blue. They had masks, 3 of them, I babbled, my words running together. I was shaking so violently I had to lean against their car to stay upright. One officer stayed with me, while the other jogged over to look at my car. The back window was completely gone, glass littering my back seat. There were visible bullet holes in my trunk and a shattered tail light. "Ma'am, you're bleeding," the officer with me said, pointing to my neck and arms. I hadn't even noticed the small cuts from the flying glass. They weren't deep, but there were dozens of them. Everything after that is kind of a blur. More police cars arrived. I gave a statement, described the car and the masks as best I could. They searched the area but didn't find them. An ambulance came and treated my cuts. Someone called my parents, who rushed to the scene. The police told me I was lucky, that people who do highway robberies like this usually aren't so aggressive unless they're desperate or on drugs. They said I took a huge risk by fleeing, but also acknowledged it probably saved me from worse harm. They never found them. The car likely had stolen plates, according to the detective who followed up with me the next day. They've linked it to 2 similar robberies in the area over the past month, but no arrests yet. It's been 5 days now, and I still can't sleep properly. Every time I close my eyes, I see those masks, hear those gunshots, feel the glass hitting my skin. I jump at every loud noise. I haven't driven anywhere since that night. My dad came and got my car from the police station and is arranging repairs. The physical cuts are healing, but I don't know when I'll feel normal again. I keep thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't seen that police car, or if one of those bullets had hit me instead of my car. I can't stop replaying every second of those terrifying minutes, wondering if I could have done something differently. I know I should be grateful to be alive, and I am, but I'm also angry and scared. I took that road because I thought it was safe. I never imagined something like this would happen to me, in my town, on roads I've driven 100 times before. I don't know what else to say. I just needed to get this out. If you've read this far, thanks for listening. And please, be careful out there. Watch your rearview mirror. Keep your doors locked. Don't drive alone at night if you can avoid it. I used to think warnings like that were just people being paranoid. Now I know better. I still can't sleep without medication. It's been 3 months since it happened, but every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. Or I guess I should say their lack of faces. Just cold, empty eyes staring at me from behind those masks. I never thought something like this would happen to me. I'm just a regular guy who delivers packages for a living. Not rich, not important, just trying to make ends meet. My name's not really Alex, by the way, but I'm going to use that for obvious reasons. I still don't know who those people were, and I'm terrified they might find me again. It was supposed to be a routine delivery run through the Smokies. I'd taken that back route dozens of times before as a shortcut between Gatlinburg and Cherokee. Cell reception is spotty, but the mountain views make up for it, and it cuts about 40 minutes off the trip. That day started like any other. I loaded up my car with packages at the depot around 7 a.m., grabbed my coffee and donut from the usual place, and hit the road. The weather was decent, overcast but not raining. I remember thinking it might clear up later. The first few deliveries went fine. I was making good time, so I decided to take that mountain shortcut I mentioned. It winds through some pretty remote areas, but like I said, I'd done it many times before without any issues. It was around 3 p.m. when everything went to hell. I'd just rounded a bend on this narrow 2-lane road. There weren't any guardrails on this stretch, just a steep drop-off on one side and a wall of rock on the other. That's when I saw it, some kind of makeshift roadblock about 100 yards ahead. At first, I thought it was road work or maybe a fallen tree they were clearing. There were these wooden crates and metal barrels arranged across the road. But then I noticed there weren't any official vehicles, no flashing lights, nothing that would indicate legitimate road maintenance. Instead, I saw people, maybe 5 or 6 of them standing behind the barricade. They were just watching me approach. I slowed down instinctively, and that's when my stomach dropped. They were armed, not hunting rifles either. These looked like serious military-style weapons. I immediately hit the brakes, still about 50 yards from them. My first thought was to turn around, but the road was so narrow there wasn't room to make a 3-point turn. I'd have to reverse back around the bend. I threw the car in reverse and started backing up, trying to see through my rear window while keeping an eye on the group ahead. That's when I saw movement in my rear view mirror. More people were emerging from the tree line behind me, effectively cutting off my escape route. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I was trapped between 2 groups of armed strangers on a road where nobody would hear me scream. No cell service, no witnesses, just me and them. I stopped the car. Fighting the urge to panic, I tried to think clearly. Maybe this was some kind of checkpoint? But they weren't wearing uniforms. Maybe they were hunting? But why block the road? One of them approached from the front group. Tall guy, wearing what looked like a camo jacket and dark pants. He had some kind of mask covering the lower half of his face. Not a medical mask, more like a tactical thing. The kind that makes someone look like a video game character. His eyes were what got to me, though. Cold, calculating, like he was assessing a piece of meat. He tapped on my window with the barrel of his gun. That sound, the metal against glass, I still hear it in my nightmares. "Out of the car," he said. His voice was muffled by the mask, but the command was clear. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely put the car in park. I rolled down my window just a crack. "I'm just making deliveries," I said, hating how my voice quivered. "I don't want any trouble." "Out, now." He stepped back slightly, his weapon still trained on me. I realized I had no choice. If I refused, they'd probably just shoot me through the window and take whatever they wanted anyway. At least if I complied, I might have some chance. I slowly opened the door and stepped out, keeping my hands visible. The mountain air felt cold against my sweat-soaked shirt. I could smell pine trees and something else, maybe fear, my own fear. They surrounded me quickly, 3 from the front group and 2 who'd come up from behind. 5 guns pointed at me. I noticed they were all dressed similarly. Practical outdoor clothing, masks or scarves covering their faces. And those eyes, just cold, assessing eyes. Wallet, phone, keys. The first guy held out his hand. I reached slowly into my pocket and handed over my wallet. Then my phone. I hesitated with the keys, and he snatched them from my hand. One of them started searching my car, rummaging through packages in the glove compartment. Another patted me down roughly, checking for weapons, I'm guessing. I didn't have any. Never felt the need to carry one before that day. I sure as hell do now. "What's in the packages?" one of them asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I just deliver them. Electronics, household stuff, clothes probably." They seemed to be conferring with each other in low voices. I caught fragments, "not what we're looking for" and "wrong vehicle," and something about the schedule. I was starting to think maybe they'd mistaken me for someone else. That gave me a flicker of hope. Maybe they'd just rob me and let me go. Then something unexpected happened. A shorter figure stepped forward from the group that had been behind me. Based on their build, I thought it might be a woman, though it was hard to tell with the baggy clothing and face covering. "You're lost," she said. Her voice was surprisingly gentle compared to the others. "We can help you." "I'm not lost," I replied automatically. "I take this route all the—" "You are lost," she interrupted, more firmly this time. "And we can help you. Come with us." That's when I realized this wasn't a simple robbery. Whatever was happening here was something much worse. They weren't just going to take my stuff and leave me stranded. They wanted me to go somewhere with them. Everything in me screamed to run, but where would I go? The drop-off on one side would likely kill me. The rock wall on the other offered no escape, and they had me surrounded with guns. I was completely at their mercy. The first guy who'd approached me, who seemed to be some kind of leader, nodded at the woman. "Get him moving. We're exposed here." She stepped closer to me. "It'll be easier if you cooperate," she said quietly. "Please don't make this difficult." Maybe it was the terror, maybe it was some kind of survival instinct kicking in, but I found myself nodding. I thought if I played along, I might find an opportunity to escape later. It was better than being shot on the spot. They led me off the road and into the forest. 2 in front, me in the middle, 3 behind me. The woman stayed close to my side. I noticed she also had a gun, though she wasn't pointing it at me like the others. We walked for about 20 minutes, moving deeper into the woods. The terrain was rough, fallen trees, rocks, thick undergrowth. I stumbled a few times, and each time the woman would steady me with a hand on my arm. It was such a bizarre contrast to the situation, this small act of consideration amidst what was clearly a kidnapping. Eventually, we reached a clearing. I'll never forget what I saw there, a makeshift camp with several tents and a large canopy. There were more people, maybe another dozen or so. Some were armed, others were working with equipment I couldn't identify from a distance. They all wore similar clothing to my captors, most with their faces covered in some way. In the center of the clearing stood a figure who immediately drew my attention. Taller than the rest, wearing what looked like a full-face mask, not like the others who just covered the lower half of their faces. This mask was white with some kind of dark markings on it. I couldn't make out the design from where I stood. The leader of my group approached this masked person and spoke in hushed tones. Several times they both looked in my direction. That's when true terror set in. This wasn't random. This wasn't mistaken identity. This was organized, deliberate, and I had stumbled right into the middle of it. My mind raced through possibilities. Were they some kind of militia? A cult, drug manufacturers, human traffickers. None of the options were good. The masked leader approached me slowly. Everyone else seemed to stand a little straighter, a little more alert. Whoever this was, they commanded respect or fear from the others. They circled me once, saying nothing. I could feel their eyes examining me through the mask. Then they spoke, voice slightly muffled but clearly male. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It was a mistake. If you let me go, I swear I won't report this. I didn't see anything." He tilted his head slightly, like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "But you have seen," he said, "and now decisions must be made." He turned to the others. "Secure him until we finish. Then we'll determine what's to be done." Two of them grabbed my arms and started leading me toward one of the smaller tents. That's when I knew, if they got me in that tent, I was never coming out alive. Pure survival instinct took over. I noticed during our walk that one area of the clearing had fewer people. There was a gap in the trees there, a potential escape route. It was now or never. I suddenly went limp, catching my guards by surprise. As they adjusted their grip, I exploded into motion. I drove my elbow into the stomach of one, twisted free from the other, and ran for that gap in the trees with everything I had. Shouts erupted behind me. Then came the sound I'd been dreading, gunshots. I heard bullets whiz past me, thudding into trees. One grazed my arm, burning like a hot poker. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I hit the tree line at full sprint and kept going. The forest was dense, which helped shield me from their aim but made running difficult. I tripped over roots, got slashed by branches, but kept moving. Their shouts echoed behind me, getting fainter as I put distance between us. I ran until my lungs were on fire and my legs were jelly. Then I ran some more. The adrenaline kept me going far beyond what I thought possible. I had no idea which direction I was heading. My only goal was away from them. After what felt like hours, but was probably 30 minutes of all-out running and another hour of stumbling forward, I collapsed against a tree. My arm was bleeding where the bullet had grazed me. My face and hands were cut from branches. My whole body trembled with exhaustion and fear. I listened carefully. No sounds of pursuit, just the normal forest noises. Wind in the trees, distant birds. I allowed myself to believe I might have escaped. As my breathing slowed, I tried to orient myself. The sun was getting low. I had maybe 2 hours of daylight left. I needed to find my way to civilization before dark. I picked myself up and kept moving, trying to head downhill, figuring that would eventually lead to a road or stream I could follow. After another hour of walking, I spotted something through the trees that made my heart soar. Asphalt. A road. Emerging from the forest, I recognized where I was. Somehow, I'd made a huge circle. This was the same road I'd been driving on, but about 2 miles past where I'd encountered the roadblock. My car was gone, of course. I started walking, staying in the tree line rather than on the road itself, afraid they might be looking for me. Every car that passed made me duck down, terrified it might be them. Eventually, as darkness fell, I saw lights ahead. A gas station. I waited, watching for about 20 minutes to make sure it wasn't somehow connected to my captors. It seemed normal. People coming and going, filling up their tanks. I approached cautiously. The clerk looked shocked when I walked in. I must have been a sight with my torn clothes and bloody arm. I told him I'd been hiking and got lost, fell down a ravine. He believed me, or at least pretended to. He let me use the phone to call a taxi. I didn't go home. I went to a motel about 50 miles away, paid cash from the emergency money I keep in my shoe. The next day, I reported my car stolen to the police, but I didn't tell them the full story. Who would believe me? And what if those people had connections in law enforcement? I quit my job the following week, moved to a different state. I'm still looking over my shoulder constantly. I've spent countless hours researching, trying to figure out who they might have been. Militia groups, drug operations, human trafficking rings. I've found nothing conclusive. The area has its share of reports about strange activities in those mountains, but nothing that matches exactly what I experienced. Sometimes I wonder if they were waiting for someone specific, and I just had the bad luck to come along at the wrong time. Other times, I think maybe they target random travelers for some purpose I don't want to imagine. All I know is that I escaped with my life, and I'm never taking a shortcut through remote areas again. Every unmarked road, every isolated stretch of highway now seems like a potential trap to me. I still have nightmares about those cold eyes and that white mask. I wake up hearing that gentle voice saying, "We can help you." Help me do what? Die? Disappear? I don't know who they were or what they wanted. I only know that somewhere in those mountains, they're probably still there, waiting for the next person to round that bend in the road. I keep replaying the events of last Tuesday in my head, trying to make sense of what happened. Even as I type this, my hands are shaking. I've always considered myself a decent person, the kind who would stop to help someone in trouble. But after what I experienced, I don't know if I'll ever be that person again. I was driving back from a job interview in Oak Ridge, about 40 miles from where I live. It hadn't gone well. The interviewer kept checking his watch, and I knew 10 minutes in that I wasn't getting the position. So I was already in a crappy mood, driving down this lonely stretch of County Road 16 that cuts through nothing but farmland and patches of woods. It was getting dark early because of the rain. Not a downpour, just that steady drizzle that makes everything gray and miserable. I had the wipers going at intervals, my headlights cutting through the gloom. The radio was playing some forgettable pop song, and I was just focused on getting home, maybe ordering a pizza, and forgetting about my failed interview. That's when I saw the kid. At first, it was just a small figure on the side of the road ahead. As I got closer, I could make out that it was a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, just standing there in the rain. No umbrella, no adult in sight. Just a small kid in a yellow raincoat, staring down at the ground. I slowed down immediately. What was a child doing out here alone? The nearest house was at least a mile back, and there was nothing ahead for several more miles. Just woods and fields. No place for a kid to be wandering alone, especially in this weather. I pulled over about 20 feet ahead and put on my hazards. In my rearview mirror, I could see the kid hadn't moved, just standing there, getting soaked. I grabbed my umbrella from the passenger seat and got out. "Hey there," I called as I approached, holding the umbrella up against the rain. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" The kid didn't respond, just kept looking down at the ground. I noticed the yellow raincoat was soaked through, like they'd been standing in the rain for hours. Their sneakers were caked with mud. "Where are your parents?" I asked, getting closer. "Do you need help?" That's when the kid looked up, and I felt the first real jolt of unease. I can't really explain what was wrong with their face. On the surface, it looked like a normal child's face. Round cheeks, small nose, big eyes, but there was something off. The proportions weren't quite right. The skin seemed too tight in some places, too loose in others. And the eyes, they were wide and innocent looking, but there was something behind them, a gleam that didn't belong in a child's eyes. It was like looking at a really good Halloween mask, almost perfect, but just wrong enough to make your skin crawl. "Are you okay?" I repeated, taking a step back without even realizing it. The kid smiled then, a wide, toothy smile that stretched too far across their face. "I'm lost," they said, in a voice that sounded like it was trying very hard to be a child's voice but wasn't quite succeeding. "Can you help me find my mommy?" Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get back in my car and drive away. But I stood frozen, unable to process what I was seeing and hearing. This close, I could smell something strange coming from the kid, like wet earth and something metallic. "Where did you last see your mom?" I asked, my mouth dry. The kid took a step toward me. "She's not far. Will you take me to her?" They reached out a small hand, and I noticed their fingernails were caked with dirt, or maybe dried blood. I took another step back. "Tell me where she is, and I can call someone to help." The kid's smile faltered for just a second, then returned, wider than before. Too wide. "But I need you to help me." Then everything happened so fast. The kid lunged at me, not like a child would, but with a sudden, violent movement that reminded me of a spider pouncing on prey. Their small hands grabbed my arms with a strength that was impossible for a child that size. The fingers dug in like claws, and I felt a sharp, burning pain where they touched my skin. I yelled and stumbled backward, dropping my umbrella. The kid was hanging onto my arms, their face inches from mine. This close, I could see that their eyes weren't right at all. The pupils were wrong, elongated like a cat's, and they seemed to reflect the dim light, like an animal's would in the dark. "Let go!" I shouted, my voice cracking with panic. The kid made a sound then that I'll never forget, not a child's laugh, but a low, gurgling chuckle that seemed to come from somewhere deep in their chest. Their mouth opened wider than any human mouth should be able to, revealing teeth that were pointed and overlapping, like they had too many crammed into that small space. Pure adrenaline kicked in. I wrenched one arm free and shoved the kid away from me with all my strength. They stumbled back but didn't fall, just stood there watching me with that terrible smile. I noticed that where their hands had gripped my arms, my jacket was torn, and I could feel something wet, my own blood. I backed away, keeping my eyes on the kid. They just stood there, head tilted at an unnatural angle, watching me with those wrong eyes. "What are you?" I whispered. The kid's smile widened impossibly further. "I'm lost," they repeated in that not quite right voice. "Don't you want to help me?" Then they took a step toward me, and I broke. I turned and ran for my car, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Behind me, I heard a sound like stones being dragged across concrete, a horrible, scraping laugh. I fumbled with my keys, hands slick with rain and blood, and finally managed to unlock the door. As I threw myself inside, I caught a glimpse of the kid in my peripheral vision. They were moving toward me, but not running, just walking with a strange, jerky gait, like someone doing a bad imitation of how a child walks. I started the engine and peeled away, tires spinning on the wet asphalt. In my rearview mirror, I could see the small figure in the yellow raincoat standing in the middle of the road, watching my car disappear into the distance. My arms were burning where the kid had grabbed me. Looking down, I saw 5 small puncture wounds on each arm, oozing blood. They were spaced exactly like fingertips would be, but deeper than any child could possibly inflict. I drove for about 20 minutes, constantly checking my mirrors, before I finally pulled over at a gas station to examine my wounds more carefully. The punctures were deep, but small, like I'd been stabbed with awls or large needles. I cleaned them as best I could in the gas station bathroom, wincing at the sting of soap on raw flesh. The attendant asked if I was okay, and I mumbled something about falling on some garden tools. He gave me a weird look, but didn't press the issue. I bought some bandages and antiseptic cream, patched myself up in my car, and got back on the road. All the way home, I kept replaying the encounter in my mind. What the hell had I just experienced? It looked like a child, but no child has that kind of strength, those kinds of teeth, those eyes. When I got home, I locked all the doors and windows. I tried to convince myself that I'd imagined the worst parts, the impossible smile, the inhuman eyes. Maybe it was just a disturbed kid who had attacked me. Maybe the weird voice and movements were just my fear distorting my perceptions. But the wounds on my arms told a different story. They weren't healing right. By the next morning, the skin around the punctures had turned an ugly purplish black, and the wounds themselves seemed deeper somehow, and they itched. God, how they itched. It was all I could do not to claw at them. I went to an urgent care clinic where the doctor looked at the wounds with obvious concern. He asked what had caused them, and I made up a story about an accident with a nail gun at work. He didn't believe me, I could tell, but he prescribed antibiotics and recommended I go to the ER if the infection got worse. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that child's face, that too wide smile, those wrong eyes. I kept thinking I heard noises outside my apartment, scraping sounds like nails on my window or a small body dragging itself across the exterior wall. The next morning, the wounds were worse. The black discoloration had spread halfway up my forearms, and the punctures themselves seemed to be moving, shifting under my skin, like something was alive in there. I took twice the recommended dose of antibiotics and called in sick to work. I spent that day researching online, trying to find any stories similar to mine, and I found a few, not many, but enough to make my blood run cold. Stories of people encountering children on deserted roads who turned out to be something else entirely. Most of the accounts ended abruptly, with no resolution. The posters just stopped responding to comments. In one thread from 3 years ago, someone claiming to be the brother of the original poster said they'd found him dead in his apartment, his body covered in small, deep puncture wounds that had turned black with infection. That night, the noises outside were louder, scratching, tapping at my windows. I pulled the blinds down tight and huddled in my bedroom, a kitchen knife clutched in my trembling hand. Around 3 a.m., I heard a child's voice, that same voice, calling from outside. "I'm lost. Won't you help me find my mommy?" Then a giggle that turned into that horrible scraping laugh. I didn't sleep at all. By morning, the scratching had stopped, but the marks on my arms had spread further. The blackness now reached my shoulders, and the puncture wounds themselves had widened, the edges puckered and weeping a clear, foul-smelling fluid. I went to the emergency room. The doctor who examined me looked genuinely alarmed. He called in 2 colleagues, and they spoke in hushed tones while looking at my arms. They took blood samples, cultures from the wounds, and gave me IV antibiotics. They wanted to admit me, but I refused. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I stayed in one place too long, that thing would find me. As I was leaving, one of the doctors caught up with me in the parking lot. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. "Whatever did this to you?" he said quietly. "It wasn't human, was it?" I stared at him, unable to respond. "I've seen wounds like this before," he continued. "Years ago, the patient..." He trailed off, looking away. "Just keep moving. Don't stay in one place. And whatever you do, don't let it touch you again." Then he walked back into the hospital, leaving me standing there, chilled to the bone despite the warm day. I went home long enough to pack a bag, then checked into a motel 30 miles away. I've been moving every day since, never staying in the same place for more than one night. The wounds have stopped spreading, but they haven't healed. The blackness has receded somewhat, but the punctures themselves remain open, weeping that clear fluid that smells like decay. And every night, no matter where I am, I hear that scratching at my window, that voice calling out to me. I'm lost. Won't you help me? Sometimes I see a small figure in a yellow raincoat standing in the parking lot of whatever motel I'm staying at, looking up at my window. Sometimes it's on the side of the highway as I'm driving, watching my car pass. Always still, always watching, always smiling that wrong smile. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it wants. All I know is that I can never stop moving, and I can never, ever stop to help someone on the side of the road again. The wounds on my arms throb as I type this. I've been feeling feverish all day. The itching is getting worse. And tonight, for the first time, I thought I saw movement under my skin, like something small wriggling beneath the surface. I don't know how much longer I can keep running. I don't know what happens when whatever is in my wounds finally emerges. All I know is that when you see a child alone on the side of a deserted road, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for both of you is to just keep driving. I've been debating whether to share this for weeks now. Still can't sleep right. Every little noise outside my window makes me jump. I keep thinking they found out who I am, where I live. I know it sounds paranoid, but after what happened, I can't help it. Last month, I made the stupidest decision of my life. It was a Tuesday night, and I was heading home from my buddy Mike's place after watching the game. It was getting late, around 11:30 p.m., and I was tired and just wanted to get home quicker. My normal route would take another 25 minutes, but I knew a shortcut through Oak Ridge Cemetery that would cut that time in half. I'd taken this shortcut before, but always during daylight, never at night. The cemetery sits on the edge of our town, just past the old industrial district. It's huge, about 40 acres of rolling hills with graves dating back to the 1800s. During the day, it's actually kind of peaceful. At night, different story. I remember hesitating at the rusty iron gates. They're supposed to be locked after sunset, but our town isn't exactly flush with cash, and the caretaker's been cutting corners for years. One of the gates was slightly ajar, just enough space for someone to slip through. I should have seen that as a warning sign. Instead, I just thought I was lucky. The air felt weirdly still as I stepped inside. No breeze, no distant traffic noise, nothing, just dead silence. The only light came from a half-moon overhead and the occasional solar-powered path light that hadn't completely died yet. Most of the cemetery was in shadow, with the old oak trees creating these massive dark patches across the grounds. I pulled out my phone to use as a flashlight, keeping it pointed at the ground so I wouldn't trip over any of the older headstones. Those things jut out of the ground at weird angles after a century of ground settling. I was trying to be respectful, you know. Like I didn't want to be the asshole running over graves or anything. I'd made it about a quarter of the way through, following the main path that winds through the center, when I heard what sounded like metal hitting dirt. It was faint, but in that silence, it stood out. I froze, trying to figure out where it was coming from. There it was again, the unmistakable sound of a shovel digging into earth. I should have turned around right then, but curiosity got the better of me. I dimmed my phone light and moved toward the sound, stepping off the path onto the grass. It was coming from the newer section of the cemetery, where the plots are from the last decade or so. As I got closer, I could see light flickering between the headstones. Not bright, like flashlights, but a softer glow that looked like it might be coming from lanterns. Then I saw them. 4 figures standing around a grave. At first, I thought maybe they were cemetery workers doing some kind of night maintenance. But at 11:30 p.m., with lanterns instead of proper lights, I crept closer, hiding behind a large memorial statue about 30 feet away. That's when I realized what I was seeing. They weren't workers, they were digging up a grave. The headstone was new, polished black granite that reflected the lantern light. I couldn't read the name from where I was, but I could see the grave itself was fresh. The dirt was still darker than the surrounding ground, and there was no grass growing on it yet. Two of the figures were inside the hole they'd dug, which looked to be about 4 feet deep already. The other two were standing guard, occasionally looking around the cemetery. They weren't dressed like you'd expect grave robbers to be. No ski masks or all black outfits. They looked normal. One guy was wearing what looked like a windbreaker and jeans. Another had on a flannel shirt. They could have been anyone you'd pass on the street without a second glance, except for what they were doing. I tried to make sense of it. Were they relatives of the deceased trying to retrieve something buried with their loved one? But why not go through proper channels? And why the middle of the night? The whole scene felt wrong. I needed to get out of there. I started to back away, still crouched behind the statue, when my foot knocked against a small vase of flowers someone had left. It tipped over with a soft thud. It wasn't loud, but in that silence, it might as well have been a gunshot. One of the men standing guard immediately turned toward the sound. "Hey!" he called out, his voice sharp in the night air. "Someone's there!" My heart nearly stopped. I didn't move, hoping they'd think it was just an animal. But then the man pulled out a flashlight and shined it in my direction. The beam caught the edge of my jacket. "Over there!" he shouted. That's when I ran. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I just needed to get away. I bolted from behind the statue, heading back toward the main path. Behind me, I could hear shouts and the sounds of people scrambling. "Get him!" someone yelled. "Don't let him get away!" I was running blind now, my phone still dimmed as I clutched it in my hand. I knew the general direction of the exit, but hadn't realized how disorienting the cemetery would be at night. Headstones and monuments loomed out of the darkness, and twice I nearly ran face first into them. I could hear them behind me, multiple sets of footsteps pounding on the ground, getting closer. I made a sharp turn off the path, cutting between rows of graves, hoping to lose them. "He went that way," a voice called out, too close for comfort. I risked a glance back and saw flashlight beams sweeping across the grounds. There were at least 3 of them in pursuit. "We can't let him go," another voice shouted. "He saw us." That's when the reality of my situation hit me. These weren't just guys who'd be embarrassed to get caught. They were desperate to catch me, and I suddenly understood why. They knew if I got away and reported them, they'd be looking at serious jail time. I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning. The ground was uneven, and my foot caught the edge of a flat grave marker. I went down hard, skinning my palms on the rough ground. Pain shot up from my knee, but I forced myself back up. No time to check the damage. I heard something, over there. They were getting closer. I cut left, then right, weaving through the older section where the graves were closer together. The moonlight created weird shadows that played tricks on my eyes. Twice I thought I saw figures standing amongst the graves, only to realize they were just monuments or trees. My only advantage was that I knew where the exit was, and they had to split up to find me. I headed toward where I thought the gates would be, but nothing looked familiar anymore. Had I gotten turned around? The footsteps behind me were getting louder. One of them was gaining. "I can see him," a voice called out. "Cut him off at the mausoleum." I spotted the large stone building they were talking about, a family mausoleum with columns at the entrance. It was directly in my path. If I went that way, they'd corner me. I veered right, toward a cluster of older graves partially hidden by overgrown bushes. As I squeezed between the bushes, branches tore at my clothes and scratched my face. I ducked down behind a tall headstone, trying to quiet my breathing, which sounded thunderous in my own ears. Flashlight beams swept over the area. They were walking slowly now, methodically checking each hiding spot. "He's here somewhere," a voice said quietly. "Spread out." I was trapped. If I moved, they'd see me. If I stayed, they'd find me. My phone was still in my hand, and I considered calling 911, but there was no way I could talk without giving away my position. Then I saw it, a gap in the cemetery fence about 20 yards away, partially hidden by overgrown ivy. It looked like a maintenance access, or maybe just a section that had broken over time. Either way, it was my only chance. I waited until the nearest flashlight beam moved away, then made my decision. I bolted from my hiding spot, running full tilt toward the gap in the fence. "There he is!" The shout came instantly. I didn't look back. I just ran, focusing everything on that gap in the fence. My lungs were on fire, legs threatening to give out, but pure adrenaline kept me going. I could hear them closing in, their footsteps pounding the ground behind me. One was close, too close. I felt fingers brush the back of my jacket, trying to grab me. I dove for the gap, squeezing through the opening. The jagged edge of the fence caught my shirt, tearing it and scraping my side. The pain barely registered as I scrambled to my feet on the other side. I was on a back street now, residential area with houses. Lights were on in some windows, people, safety. But I couldn't stop. I sprinted down the middle of the street, risking a glance back at the cemetery fence. Two figures stood there watching me. They didn't follow. Even they weren't crazy enough to chase me into a populated area where they might be seen. I ran 3 more blocks before my legs finally gave out. I collapsed against someone's garden wall, gasping for breath, my whole body shaking. My knee was bleeding through my jeans and my side stung where the fence had caught me. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, just trying to pull myself together enough to stand again. When I finally did, I limped the rest of the way home, constantly looking over my shoulder. Once inside my apartment, I locked the door, then shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. I was safe, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being hunted. I debated calling the police that night, but didn't. What would I even say? That I'd seen some guys digging up a grave but couldn't identify them? That I'd been trespassing in a cemetery after hours? And what if they had connections with local law enforcement? In a town this size, you never know. The next morning, I checked the local news, expecting to see something about grave robbery. Nothing. I drove past the cemetery on my way to work, trying to look casual. Everything seemed normal. No police, no crime scene tape. Just the caretaker mowing the grass like any other day. I've been keeping an eye on the obituaries and local news since then. 2 weeks ago, there was a small article about a grave that had been disturbed at Oak Ridge Cemetery. The police called it vandalism. The body wasn't missing, they said, but some items buried with the deceased were gone. They're treating it as a routine cemetery theft. But I know what I saw. Those weren't vandals or ordinary thieves. The way they worked, how organized they were, they knew exactly what they were doing, and they were willing to chase down a witness to keep it quiet. I still don't know what they were after, or why that specific grave. Was it jewelry? Something more valuable? Or something else entirely? I've thought about going to the police many times since then, but something always holds me back. Maybe it's fear. I didn't see their faces clearly, but what if they saw mine? What if they recognized me? This town isn't that big. All I know is I'm never taking that shortcut again. And sometimes, When I'm walking home at night, I swear I can feel eyes on me from the shadows, watching, waiting. I keep wondering if they're still out there, worried about the guy who got away, the guy who saw what they did. I still struggle to sleep when it rains at night. It's been 8 months since what happened on Route 16 outside of Ravenwood, but my body instantly goes into fight-or-flight mode the moment raindrops hit my window after dark. I've tried therapy. I've tried meditation. I've even tried moving to a different town, but nothing erases what happened that night. I was driving back from visiting my sister in Glendale, about 2 hours from Ravenwood where I lived. It was supposed to be a simple trip. Visit for the weekend, head back Sunday evening, be home in time to prepare for work on Monday. That's not how it played out. The rain started about 45 minutes into my drive home. Not just a drizzle, but the kind of downpour where your wipers can barely keep up, even at their highest setting. I remember leaning forward in my seat, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, trying to make out the road ahead through sheets of water. The local radio station kept cutting in and out, and the few cars I'd seen on the road earlier had all disappeared. I was alone on Route 16, a winding 2-lane road that cuts through miles of dense forest before reaching Ravenwood. During the day, it's actually pretty scenic. At night, in a storm, it's a completely different place. The flat tire happened so suddenly. I heard a loud pop and felt my car lurch to the right. I managed to keep control and pull over to the narrow shoulder, but my heart was already racing. I sat there for a moment, rain hammering on the roof, debating whether to wait it out or change the tire myself. My phone showed no service, not unusual for that stretch of road, so calling for help wasn't an option. After about 10 minutes of hoping another car would pass by, I accepted that I needed to handle this myself. I popped the trunk, grabbed my raincoat, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit me like a physical force. Within seconds, I was soaked despite the raincoat. The wind whipped around me, sending cold droplets into my face and making it hard to see. I remember the distinct smell of wet asphalt and pine trees as I made my way to the trunk to get the spare tire and jack. As I knelt by the flat tire, my jeans instantly soaking through at the knees, I started loosening the lug nuts with the tire iron. The rain was running down my face, into my eyes, making everything 10 times harder. My hands kept slipping on the metal. I was cursing under my breath, frustrated and increasingly anxious about being alone on this road. That's when I first noticed something wasn't right. It wasn't a clear thought at first, just a sensation, the kind of primal feeling that makes the hair on your arms stand up. Something rustled in the bushes about 15 feet from where I was working. I initially dismissed it as an animal or the wind, but then I felt it. That unmistakable feeling of being watched. I glanced toward the tree line but couldn't see anything through the darkness and rain. The single headlight that still worked on my car created more shadows than illumination. I tried to focus on the tire again, working faster now, my hands shaking not just from the cold. Another rustle, closer this time. I froze, the tire iron clutched in my hand. My breathing became shallow, and I strained my ears trying to hear over the constant drum of rain. It's just an animal, I told myself, probably a raccoon or something. But deep down, I knew better. Animals in these woods don't approach humans, especially not during storms. I managed to get the flat tire off and was struggling to align the spare when I heard it. Footsteps. Not animal footsteps. Human footsteps, trying to be quiet but still audible on the wet leaves behind me. I turned around slowly, tire iron still in hand, And that's when I saw them, dark figures emerging from the tree line. Not one person, but several, at least 4 or 5 silhouettes, moving deliberately toward me. I couldn't make out their faces in the darkness, just their outlines against the black forest backdrop. They weren't speaking. That's what terrified me the most. If they were good Samaritans stopping to help, they would have called out, announced themselves, asked if I needed assistance. But there was nothing, just silent, purposeful movement in my direction. My instinct screamed danger. My mouth went completely dry. I fumbled for my phone with my free hand, frantically trying to call 911, despite knowing there was no service. The no signal message confirmed my worst fear. I was completely alone with whatever was approaching. The closest figure was maybe 30 feet away now. I could hear their breathing. I saw something metallic gleam briefly in one of their hands when it caught the reflection of my headlight. "What do you want?" I called out, trying to sound brave, but hearing the tremor in my voice. No response, just continued approach. Steady, deliberate. In that moment, I made a split-second decision that probably saved my life. I wasn't going to find out what they wanted. The spare tire wasn't on properly, and my car wasn't an option. There was only one choice. I gripped the tire iron tight, took one deep breath, and ran. I darted past the front of my car and plunged into the darkness of the road ahead. Behind me, I heard sudden movement, quick footsteps and the first sounds from my pursuers. "Get her!" A man's voice, deep and urgent. "Don't let her get away!" Another voice, higher pitched but equally menacing. Their words sent ice through my veins. Whatever they had planned, I knew it was something I wouldn't survive. I ran like I've never run before. The rain pounded against me, each drop feeling like a tiny bullet. The road was slick under my feet, and twice I nearly fell. My lungs burned after just 100 yards, but pure adrenaline kept me moving. I could hear them behind me. Not right behind me. I had a head start. But they were following, their footsteps splashing on the wet asphalt. The road ahead curved and dipped, disappearing into darkness. I had no idea how far the next sign of civilization might be. In daylight, I knew this stretch of Route 16 had nothing for at least 5 miles in either direction. At my running pace, that would take over 30 minutes, if I could even maintain speed, which I doubted. I risked a glance back and saw their flashlights now, beams cutting through the rain, bouncing as they ran. They were spreading out across the road, trying to cut off any attempt I might make to double back or veer into the forest. My right shoe was coming loose, water and mud making it slip on my heel with every step. My lungs felt like they were full of fire instead of air, but stopping wasn't an option. "We just want to talk to you," one of them called, a statement so obviously false it might have made me laugh in any other circumstance. I didn't respond, just kept running. The rain seemed to be coming down even harder now, limiting visibility to just a few feet ahead. The darkness was nearly complete, except for the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the road for split seconds. During one of these flashes, I saw something that gave me hope. About a quarter-mile ahead, the tree line on the right side of the road broke. There appeared to be a small dirt road or path leading away from the main road. It might lead nowhere, but it was a chance to break their line of sight. I pushed myself harder, feeling a stabbing pain in my side with each breath. The flashlight beams behind me seemed to be falling a bit further back. Maybe they were tiring too, or maybe the rain was making it hard for them to keep up the pace. When I reached the dirt path, I made an immediate right turn without slowing down. The ground here was softer, muddier, and my feet sank slightly with each step, making it harder to run. But I pressed on, ignoring the burning in my thighs and the stitch in my side that felt like someone was driving a knife between my ribs. The path inclined slightly upward and curved to the left. I followed it blindly, having no idea where it led. After about 2 minutes of running up this path, I stopped and listened, pressing myself against a large tree trunk. I couldn't hear footsteps anymore, just the constant drumming of rain and my own desperate gasping for air. Had I lost them? Or were they quietly stalking up the path, having seen me turn? I gave myself just 30 seconds to recover, counting each second in my head. My entire body was trembling from exertion and fear. The tire iron was still clutched in my right hand, my only weapon if they found me. 28, 29, 30. Time to move. I continued up the path more cautiously now, trying to make less noise. The path seemed to be widening slightly. Through the rain, I could make out what looked like some kind of structure ahead, a building of some sort. As I got closer, relief washed over me. It was a gas station, an old, run-down-looking place, but definitely a gas station with lights on. I could see the faint glow of fluorescent lighting through the rain. With renewed energy, I sprinted the final distance to the station, burst through the door, and collapsed onto the dirty linoleum floor, gasping for breath. An older man behind the counter jumped up in surprise. "Jesus Christ, are you all right, miss?" I couldn't speak at first, just pointed back toward the door, still clutching the tire iron. The man, gray-haired, probably in his 60s, came around the counter and helped me to my feet. "Someone's after me," I finally managed to say between gulps of air. "Please call the police." The man looked out the window into the darkness, then reached for a phone behind the counter. "What happened? Who's after you?" As he dialed, I tried to explain about my car, the flat tire, and the people who had emerged from the woods. Even as I was saying it, I realized how crazy it sounded. Who would be waiting in the woods during a storm just to attack a random driver? The gas station attendant spoke briefly with the police, giving them the location and saying there was a young woman in distress. After hanging up, he locked the front door and pulled down a metal security gate. "Police are on their way. Should be about 15 minutes. You're safe now." I nodded, still struggling to catch my breath. He gave me a bottled water and a scratchy paper towel to wipe my face. I was creating a puddle on his floor, rain dripping from every inch of my clothing. "You ran all the way from Route 16? He asked, eyebrows raised. "That's over 2 miles from here." 2 miles? It had felt like 10. No wonder my legs were shaking uncontrollably, and my lungs felt shredded. We waited in tense silence for the police. Every few seconds, I would look out the windows, expecting to see those figures emerging from the darkness. But there was nothing, just rain and occasional headlights from passing cars on what I now realized was a different road entirely. I had somehow cut across to Route 43, a parallel highway I hadn't even known was there. When the police finally arrived, I told them everything. They took my statement seriously but seemed skeptical about people hiding in the woods. One officer suggested they might have been other travelers seeking shelter from the storm who got spooked when I ran. They drove me back to my car with an escort. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. The flat tire, the jack, the spare partially attached. There was no sign anyone had been there. My belongings in the car were untouched. The officers helped me finish changing the tire and followed me home to make sure I arrived safely. They promised to patrol the area for any suspicious activity, but their tone suggested they thought this was more a case of a woman alone getting spooked in a storm than anything sinister. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. Those weren't helpful strangers or lost travelers. The way they moved, their silence until I ran, that gleam of metal, they meant to harm me. I've driven that stretch of Route 16 in daylight since then, looking for any clue about who they might have been. There are no houses nearby, no obvious place someone would take shelter during a storm, just dense forest on both sides. The gas station attendant told me later that there had been rumors of a group operating in the area, targeting stranded motorists, especially women alone. Nothing ever confirmed, just whispered stories at the local diner. The kind of thing you dismiss as small-town paranoia until you experience something yourself. I've moved away from Ravenwood now. I couldn't stay after what happened. Sometimes I wonder if I overreacted that night, if maybe those figures really were just people seeking shelter who got as scared of me as I was of them. But then I remember their voices when I ran. "Get her! Don't let her get away!" And I know my instincts were right. I still have the tire iron. I keep it under my bed in my new apartment, and I still can't sleep when it rains at night. This happened to me about 9 months ago, but I still can't bring myself to talk about it much. I'm posting this here because I need to tell someone. I don't know if writing this will help me process what happened, but I'm at my wit's end. I live in Pineview, a town so unremarkable that most people just pass through it on their way to somewhere better. It's the kind of place where nothing ever happens, where the most exciting event is when someone gets a new car or when the grocery store stocks a different brand of cereal. I've always been fine with that. I'm not exactly a thrill seeker. I work from home as a web developer, keep to myself, and generally enjoy the quiet. That night in January started like any other. It had been raining non-stop for 3 days, and I was holed up in my one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a complex that had seen better days. The constant drumming of the rain against my windows had become white noise at that point. I remember I was slouched on my couch, half watching some documentary about deep-sea creatures while scrolling through my phone. It was around 10:30 p.m. when my phone rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Nobody ever calls me that late. I stared at the screen for a second, not recognizing the number. No caller ID, just a string of digits I didn't know. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was boredom. Whatever it was, I wish I'd just let it go to voicemail. "Hello?" I said, expecting a robocall or someone who dialed the wrong number. There was nothing but silence on the other end. Not even breathing, just emptiness. I was about to hang up when I heard it, a soft click, like someone adjusting their grip on the phone. "Hello, Jack." The voice was low, almost a whisper, but clear enough that I could hear the slight smile behind the words. My stomach dropped. I don't know why, but something about the way they said my name made me instantly uneasy. "Who is this?" I asked, sitting up straight. "I know your secrets, Jack," the voice continued, completely ignoring my question. There was something wrong with the voice, not distorted exactly, but off, like they were speaking through something. "I know everything about you." I felt cold all over. My mind raced through possibilities. Was this a prank? A scam? But how did they know my name? "I don't know who you think," I started, but they cut me off. "I know what you did in Seattle 3 years ago. I know about the money. I know about the emails you've been sending to her." My blood turned to ice. Seattle? I'd never even been to Seattle. The money? What money? And who was her? None of it made sense, but the absolute certainty in their voice made me doubt myself for a second. Like maybe I'd forgotten something terrible I'd done. "I think you have the wrong person," I said, my voice cracking slightly. The caller laughed, a sound like sandpaper on stone. "You can't hide anymore, Jack. I've been watching you. I see you right now, sitting on that ugly green couch in your apartment, 3rd floor, Unit 307. My head snapped up, and I found myself staring at my windows. The blinds were closed, but suddenly they seemed paper thin. Was someone out there, watching me through the rain? I got up and moved away from the window, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not what I want, Jack. It's what's coming for you. There will be consequences if you don't follow my instructions very carefully." I felt dizzy. "What are you talking about? What instructions?" There was a pause, and then the caller's voice dropped even lower. "Time's up for tonight, Jack, but I'll be in touch. Don't try to run. Don't try to hide. I'll find you wherever you go." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there in the middle of my living room, my phone still pressed against my ear, listening to nothing. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I forced myself to take a deep breath, then another. This had to be a mistake or a really messed up prank. Maybe someone from work, but nobody at my job knew my address or what my couch looked like. I walked to each window in my apartment, checking that the blinds were fully closed. Then I went to my front door and made sure it was locked, even sliding the chain into place. I was being paranoid, I told myself. It was just some weirdo making random calls, throwing out vague threats to see who would bite. But they knew my name. They knew my apartment number. They knew about my couch. I paced around my living room, trying to shake off the crawling sensation on my skin. Maybe I should call the police. But what would I say? Some creep called me and knew things about me. They'd probably just tell me to block the number. I picked up my phone to do exactly that when it rang again. The same number. My heart leapt into my throat, and for a second, I couldn't move. On the third ring, I answered, prepared to tell them to leave me alone or I'd call the cops. But the voice on the other end was different this time. Higher, frantic, breathing hard like they'd been running. "Jack? Jack, is that you?" It was still a voice I didn't recognize, but the menace was gone, replaced by what sounded like genuine fear. "Who is this?" I demanded, my own fear making me angry. "Jack, you're in danger," the voice hissed urgently. "You have to get out of there before it's too late. They know where you are." "What are you talking about? Who knows where I am? Who is they?" "There's no time to explain," the caller said, words tumbling out in a rush. "Just grab what you need and go, now. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Don't use your phone after this call. Don't use your credit cards. Just go." "This isn't funny," I said, but my mouth had gone dry. Something about their panic was contagious, seeping through the phone and into my veins. "Please," the voice begged. "I'm trying to help you. You helped me once. Now I'm returning the favor. Get out now." Before I could ask anything else, the line went dead again. I stared at my phone, a sense of unreality washing over me. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen in real life, especially not in Pineview, and especially not to someone as unremarkable as me. I tried to think rationally. This was clearly some kind of scam or sick game. The smart thing would be to turn off my phone, maybe call a friend to come over and forget about it. But what if it wasn't? What if there really was someone coming for me? The first caller had known details they shouldn't have known. And this second caller, why would they be warning me if there wasn't some grain of truth to it? I stood in the middle of my living room, paralyzed with indecision, when I heard it. A soft scraping sound from my front door, like someone trying the handle very, very gently. That was all it took. Panic exploded in my chest, and suddenly I was moving on autopilot. I grabbed my backpack from the closet and started shoving things into it. My laptop, charger, wallet, a change of clothes, my toothbrush. Basic survival instinct had taken over. I didn't even know where I was going, just that I needed to get out. As I moved through my apartment, I became hyper-aware of every sound: the rain outside, the hum of my refrigerator, the creaking of the building. Was that footsteps on the stairs? Was someone waiting for me in the hallway? I changed into jeans and a dark hoodie, pulled on my sneakers, and slung the backpack over my shoulder. Then I hesitated, staring at my front door. If someone was out there, waiting for me. I went to my bedroom window instead. It opened onto the fire escape, a rusty metal structure I'd never thought I'd actually use. I pushed the window up slowly, trying not to make noise, and climbed out into the pouring rain. The cold hit me immediately, rain soaking through my hoodie in seconds. The fire escape was slippery, and I had to grip the railing tight as I made my way down. Every step made the metal creak, and I was sure whoever was after me would hear it over the storm. When I reached the bottom, I dropped down into the alley behind my building. The darkness was almost complete here, the only light coming from a distant street lamp at the mouth of the alley. I pressed myself against the brick wall, trying to get my bearings and figure out where to go. That's when I felt it, that prickling sensation on the back of your neck when you know you're being watched. I spun around, peering into the darkness, but saw nothing, just shadows and rain. Still, the feeling persisted, growing stronger, like invisible fingers brushing against my skin. I had to move. Standing there would only make me an easier target. I took a deep breath and started running, staying close to the buildings for cover. The rain hammered down relentlessly, forming puddles that splashed up my legs with each step. My backpack bounced painfully against my spine, but I didn't slow down. I had no destination in mind. I just ran, turning randomly at corners, doubling back occasionally, doing anything I could to lose whoever might be following me. The streets were deserted. No one else was crazy enough to be out in this weather at this hour. It was just me, the rain, and the growing certainty that I wasn't alone out here. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, I had to stop to catch my breath. I ducked under the awning of a closed barber shop, gasping for air, my legs burning. I was soaked to the bone and shivering, partly from the cold and partly from fear. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, splashing through puddles, coming my way. They were unhurried, deliberate, the sound distinct even through the constant patter of the rain. I pressed myself against the shop door, hoping the darkness would hide me, and held my breath. A figure appeared at the end of the block, just a silhouette against the glow of a streetlight. They were tall, wearing what looked like a long coat, their face completely obscured. They stopped, seeming to scan the street, and then turned their head directly toward my hiding spot. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted from the awning and tore down the street in the opposite direction, no longer caring about being quiet or strategic. Pure animal fear propelled me forward. I heard the footsteps behind me pick up pace, pursuing but not quite running, like they knew they didn't need to hurry to catch me. I ran blindly, my lungs burning and my muscles screaming for relief. I splashed through puddles, slipped on wet pavement, and nearly collided with a parked car, but I kept going. The town I'd known my whole life suddenly seemed alien and maze-like. Every street looked the same in the darkness and the rain. Just when I thought I couldn't run anymore, I saw it, lights in the distance. Bright, welcoming lights that meant people, safety, witnesses. I changed course, heading straight for them, summoning a final burst of energy from reserves I didn't know I had. As I got closer, I could see it was the 24-hour diner on the edge of town, a place where truckers and night shift workers stopped for coffee and cheap food. Through the rain-streaked windows, I could make out people inside, sitting at the counter, unaware of the nightmare I was living through just outside. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The figure was still there, about half a block behind me, still walking at that same measured pace. I couldn't see their face, just the dark outline moving steadily toward me. With one final push, I sprinted across the parking lot and burst through the diner's doors. The warmth and light hit me like a physical force, and I nearly collapsed right there on the linoleum floor. Water pooled around my feet as I stood there gasping, drawing stares from the handful of customers and the waitress behind the counter. "You okay, honey?" the waitress asked, already moving toward me with a concerned expression. I turned to look out the window at the rain-drenched parking lot I'd just crossed. There was no one there, no tall figure in a coat, no pursuer, just empty asphalt glistening under the fluorescent lights of the diner's sign. I sank into the nearest booth, my legs finally giving out. The waitress brought me a towel and a cup of coffee, asked if I needed her to call someone. I shook my head, unable to explain what had just happened, what I was running from. I sat in that diner until dawn, watching the door, jumping at every sound. When the sun finally came up, I used the diner's phone to call a friend to pick me up. I still haven't gone back to my apartment. I stayed with friends for a while, then found a new place in a different town. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, even considered changing my name. But the worst part? I still don't know what any of it was about. I don't know who called me, who was chasing me, or why. I don't know if I was targeted specifically or if I was just random prey in someone's sick game. Sometimes I convince myself it was all a mistake. They were after a different Jack, someone who really did do something in Seattle, someone who deserved to be hunted through the rain. But then I remember how the caller knew about my couch, my apartment number, and I know it wasn't a mistake. 9 months later, and I still check over my shoulder constantly. I still wake up in the middle of the night, certain I hear someone trying my door handle. I still can't shake the feeling that whoever, or whatever, was after me that night is still out there, still watching, still waiting for the perfect moment to find me again. And I never, ever answer calls from numbers I don't recognize. I don't think I'll ever forget that night driving through Oak Ridge 6 months ago. I moved from Portland to Eugene last year for a management position at a tech company, and my girlfriend still lives up north. We take turns visiting each other on weekends, which means late Sunday night drives back home for me. It was around 11:30 p.m. when I started heading back to Eugene after spending the weekend at her place. The weather forecast had warned about heavy rain, but what started out as a light drizzle quickly turned into the kind of downpour where your windshield wipers can barely keep up no matter how fast they're going. You know the type, where the rain is coming down so hard it sounds like someone's dumping buckets of water on your car. I was exhausted. We'd stayed up late the night before watching movies, and I probably should have left earlier, but I needed to be at work by 8 a.m. Monday morning. The drive normally takes about 2 hours, but with the rain, I was looking at closer to 3. I remember turning up the radio to stay alert, some late-night talk show discussing conspiracy theories about the government or something. The stretch of I-5 near Oak Ridge is pretty deserted, especially late on Sunday nights. The road narrows as it winds through the mountains, and there aren't many streetlights. It's mainly just you, your headlights, and whatever's in front of you. I'd been driving for about an hour and a half at that point, and I'd only passed maybe 3 or 4 other cars the entire time. I remember checking my GPS and seeing I still had about 45 minutes until I'd reach my apartment. That's when I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. A car had been behind me for a while, keeping a steady distance. I didn't think much of it until I spotted another set of headlights up ahead, moving erratically. At first, I assumed the driver was just struggling with the rain like I was. The roads were slick as hell, and hydroplaning was a real concern. But as I got closer, I could see the car swerving wildly across both lanes. My first thought was, drunk driver. Not uncommon on a Sunday night, sadly. I eased off the gas, creating more distance between us. The car behind me did the same. Then it happened so fast. The swerving car suddenly spun out, its taillights making spiral patterns in the darkness before it veered off the road and slammed into a massive oak tree just off the shoulder. My heart jumped into my throat. I immediately hit the brakes and pulled over, grabbing my phone to dial 911 as I put on my hazard lights. The car that had been following me also stopped about 50 yards back. The 911 operator answered as I was already getting out of my car. The rain hit me like someone had turned a fire hose on me. Within seconds, I was completely drenched. I told the operator what happened while running toward the crashed vehicle, which was a dark sedan, steam rising from its crumpled hood despite the rain. There's been an accident on I-5 southbound, about 5 miles north of Oak Ridge, I shouted over the rain, trying to keep my phone somewhat dry by hunching over it. A car just crashed into a tree. I don't know how many people are inside or if they're okay. The operator told me emergency services were on their way, but it would take at least 15 minutes given our location and the weather. She asked if I could check on the passengers without putting myself in danger. As I approached the wrecked car, I noticed that something felt wrong. I can't really explain it, just this gut feeling that something about the scene wasn't right. The car wasn't smoking or on fire, but the front end was completely smashed in where it had hit the tree. The impact had been on the driver's side, twisting the entire frame of the car. I could hear voices coming from inside, multiple people crying out for help. I tried the passenger door, but it was jammed shut from the impact. I went back to the driver's side, but it was completely crushed against the tree. There was no way to open it. I heard someone inside scream, "Please get us out, the car might explode." Looking back now, that should have been my first real warning sign. Cars don't typically explode like they do in movies, especially in the rain. But in the moment, with people crying for help, my adrenaline was pumping too hard to think straight. I looked around for something to break a window with. The ground was muddy and dark, but I managed to find a fist-sized rock near the tree. I yelled for the passengers to cover their faces, then smashed the rear passenger window. Glass shattered inward, and immediately arms reached out through the broken window. There were 3 people inside, 2 men in the front and a woman in the back. The woman was the first one I helped out. She was wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, both soaked with what I initially thought was rain, but later realized was probably blood mixed with rain. She had a cut on her forehead that was bleeding pretty badly. Thank you," she kept saying as I helped her away from the car. "My boyfriend and his brother are still inside." I helped her to the side of the road and told her to sit down while I went back for the others. The passenger in the front seat was next. He was a heavy-set guy, maybe in his 30s, with a thick beard. He seemed dazed, possibly concussed. His right arm hung at an awkward angle, clearly broken. "Be careful with Mark," he said, pointing to the driver still trapped inside. "I think his leg is pinned." Getting the driver out, was harder. The dashboard had collapsed onto his legs, and the steering wheel was pressed against his chest. He was conscious but clearly in pain, struggling to breathe. "You gotta help me, man," he gasped. "I can't feel my legs." I told him help was coming, but that we needed to get him out if possible. I reached in through the shattered window and managed to recline his seat a bit, which gave him some relief from the pressure on his chest. Then I went around to the broken rear window and crawled halfway into the back seat to try to help pull him out from behind. That's when I saw it. Partially hidden under what looked like a jacket on the floor of the back seat was the unmistakable shape of a handgun. Not a small one either. It looked like something you'd see cops carrying. My blood instantly went cold. I tried to act like I hadn't seen anything. I continued helping the driver, who was groaning in pain as I managed to free his legs from under the dashboard. With a lot of effort, I helped pull him out through the rear window. He was heavier than he looked, and getting him out in the rain on my own was one of the hardest physical things I've ever done. Once he was out, I noticed that his injuries didn't seem as severe as I'd expected, given how trapped he'd appeared. He limped heavily as I helped him to where the others were sitting by the roadside. But there wasn't the kind of trauma you'd expect from someone whose legs had been crushed. By this point, the rain had let up slightly, but we were all completely soaked. The 3 accident victims were huddled together under a small tree by the roadside. I stood a few feet away, suddenly very aware of the gun in their car and the strange feeling I'd had from the beginning. I glanced back at the road and noticed the car that had stopped behind me was now gone. When had they left? Had they even gotten out to help? I never saw anyone else at the scene. "The ambulance should be here soon," I said, checking my phone. "No signal." "Great. I told them where we are." "Thanks, man. You saved our lives," the driver said. He was now standing almost normally, the limp seemingly forgotten. "We really appreciate it." The woman was staring at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Did you get all our stuff out of the car?" she asked. "What?" "No, I was focused on getting you guys out," I replied. "There's a bag in the trunk," the heavy-set passenger said. "Important documents, you know, insurance papers and stuff. We should get it before the police arrive." That's when it clicked. The gun, the mysterious car that had been following me and then disappeared. The accident that happened right in front of me on an otherwise empty road. The injuries that seemed to vanish once they were out of the car. "I think we should wait for the police," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They'll want to see everything exactly as it is." The 3 exchanged glances. The driver took a step toward me. "Look, man, we're really grateful, but we need that bag. It's private stuff." I backed up a step. "I understand, but I really think we should wait for the authorities." "Did you see anything in the car?" the woman asked sharply. "When you were helping us out?" My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. "No, nothing. Just focused on getting you all to safety." The driver and the heavy-set guy exchanged another look. I was about 10 feet from my car now, keys still in my pocket. "What's your name?" the driver asked, his tone suddenly different. "Connor," I said automatically, then immediately regretted giving my real name. "Well, Connor," he continued, taking another step toward me, "we really appreciate your help, but—" He was cut off by the distant sound of sirens. Relief flooded through me. The driver's face hardened. "Shit," the heavy-set one muttered. "We need to go." To my shock, all 3 of them suddenly bolted toward the woods on the other side of the highway. The driver, who'd been supposedly unable to feel his legs, was now running full speed. The woman paused at the edge of the trees and looked back at me. "You didn't see anything," she called out. "You understand?" Then they were gone, disappearing into the darkness of the forest. I stood there in the rain, completely stunned. The sirens grew louder, and within a minute, 2 state police cars appeared, followed closely by an ambulance. I was still standing in the same spot, trying to process what had just happened. When the officers approached, I told them everything: the accident, the gun I'd seen, and how the victims had fled into the woods when they heard sirens. The officers immediately called for backup and began searching the area while paramedics checked me over for injuries. I was fine physically, just soaked and in shock. One of the officers investigated the crashed car and quickly found the gun I'd mentioned. But that wasn't all. In the trunk, they discovered a duffel bag containing more weapons and what looked like equipment for breaking into buildings. There was also a laptop and several phones. As more police arrived, including a detective, the story started coming together. The detective showed me some photos on his phone, asking if I recognized any of the 3 people. I confirmed they were the same ones I'd helped. "You're lucky to be alive, Mr. Walsh," the detective told me. "These 3 are suspects in a string of armed robberies across 3 states. We believe they were planning another one tonight in Eugene." He explained that they had likely staged the accident after spotting me on the road, a potential witness they could use if things went wrong. The car that had been following me was probably their accomplice, who drove off once they realized the police were coming. "So, what was their plan?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it all. "Based on similar cases, they likely would have forced you to drive them away from the scene, possibly to their next target. Once they didn't need you anymore." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I gave my statement at the scene and again at the police station in Eugene. The investigation continued for weeks. They eventually caught 2 of the 3 suspects trying to cross into California. The woman, however, was never found. For months afterward, I couldn't drive that stretch of highway without breaking into a cold sweat. I installed a dash cam in my car and started taking a longer route to Portland that avoided Oak Ridge completely. I still do. My girlfriend moved down to Eugene last month. She says it's because she found a better job here. But I know it's partly because I still can't handle that drive. I haven't told many people about what happened. Who would believe that stopping to help at an accident scene nearly got me killed? The detective calls occasionally with updates on the case. They found evidence linking the group to at least 7 armed robberies and 2 homicides. They also found a stolen car abandoned not far from where the accident occurred, the car that had been following me. What still keeps me up at night, though, is knowing that the woman is still out there somewhere. Sometimes when I'm driving alone at night, I catch myself checking the rearview mirror more often than I should, looking for headlights following too closely or strange cars pulling over when I do. I still want to believe that helping others is the right thing to do. I don't regret stopping to help that night. Who knows what they might have done to someone else if I hadn't. But now I keep pepper spray in my car, and I never get out at night without calling 911 first and keeping them on the line. And whenever it rains heavily, I stay home. I can't sleep anymore. I've tried everything. Pills, meditation, alcohol. Nothing works. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. It's been 2 weeks since it happened, and I still jump at shadows. I need to get this off my chest, so maybe writing it down will help. I don't expect anyone to believe me, but this is what happened to me on Highway 16 outside Blackwater County. I was driving back from a business conference in Portland. It was about 9 p.m., and the rain was coming down in sheets, the kind of downpour where your wipers can barely keep up. I was exhausted after 3 days of fake smiling and networking, just wanting to get home to my empty apartment. The highway was practically deserted. I hadn't seen another car for at least 20 minutes. That's when I spotted him, just standing there on the shoulder, thumb out, completely drenched. A young guy, maybe mid-20s, with a backpack and no rain gear. At first, I drove past him. I'm not stupid. I've seen enough horror movies to know picking up hitchhikers isn't the smartest move. But something made me look in my rearview mirror. He was just standing there, shoulders slumped, rain pouring off him. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was exhaustion clouding my judgment. Maybe it was some misplaced Good Samaritan instinct. Whatever it was, I found myself hitting the brakes and pulling over about 50 yards ahead of him. I still remember the feeling in my gut as I watched him jog toward my car in my side mirror. Something felt off, wrong, but I ignored it. I reached over and unlocked the passenger door just as he arrived. "Thanks, man. Really appreciate it," he said as he slid into the seat. He was completely soaked, water immediately pooling on my car's upholstery. He had dark hair plastered to his forehead and was wearing jeans and a gray hoodie that had turned almost black from the rain. "No problem. Where you headed?" I asked, trying to sound casual while pulling back onto the empty highway. "Just up the road a ways," he replied vaguely, setting his backpack between his feet. "Just needed to get out of that rain." I nodded and turned the heater up, trying to ignore the water dripping everywhere. "I'm Liam," I said, attempting small talk. "Jake," he replied after a pause that lasted just a beat too long. I'm not even sure that was his real name. As we drove, I tried to make conversation, asking where he was from, where he was going. His answers were short, evasive. He kept fidgeting with the zipper of his backpack, and I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. I told myself it was just from the cold, but that feeling in my gut was getting stronger. Something was seriously wrong with this guy. His eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, then to the side mirrors, then back to me, like he was expecting someone to be following us. I turned on the radio to fill the awkward silence, but he immediately reached out and turned it off. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Headache." We drove in silence for about 10 minutes. The rain was letting up a little, but the darkness outside felt oppressive. There were no streetlights on this stretch of highway, just the occasional reflective marker glinting in my headlights. The trees on either side of the road created a tunnel effect that made me feel increasingly claustrophobic. I was just about to ask him exactly where he wanted to be dropped off when he spoke. "You shouldn't have picked me up." His voice had changed, becoming flat, emotionless. I glanced over at him, trying to keep my voice light. "Oh yeah? Why's that?" His eyes met mine, and what I saw there made my blood freeze. They were completely empty, dead. "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into." Before I could respond, he reached down and unzipped his backpack. Time seemed to slow down as he pulled out a hunting knife with a serrated edge. The blade must have been 8 inches long, and it caught the glow from my dashboard lights as he raised it. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice still eerily calm as he pointed the knife at me, holding it inches from my throat. "But I can't let you go now. You know too much." My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Know too much. I didn't know anything. I had just picked him up 5 minutes ago. "Look, man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know anything about you. I was just giving you a ride. Whatever you're involved in, it has nothing to do with me. Keep driving, he ordered, ignoring my words. And don't try anything stupid. My mind was racing. What the hell had I gotten myself into? Was he on drugs, running from something? Was he going to kill me? The knife was so close, I could feel the coldness of the metal near my skin. Where are we going? I asked, hating how my voice shook. Just drive, he snapped, pressing the knife closer. I felt a sharp sting and warm trickle on my neck, where the tip had just broken the skin. I tried to think of a way out. I could crash the car, but at the speed we were going, I'd probably kill us both. I could try to grab the knife, but he had the advantage. One slip, and he could slice my throat open. That's when I saw it through the rain. The neon lights of a roadside diner about half a mile ahead. My heart skipped a beat. People, witnesses, help. I needed to time this perfectly. I casually moved my right hand to the turn signal, trying to act normal while keeping my eyes on the road. The knife was still hovering at my throat. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Bathroom break," I lied, trying to sound casual despite my racing heart. "Been driving for hours, place up ahead." He hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Fine, but try anything and you're dead." The diner was coming up fast on the right. I could see a few cars in the parking lot, lights glowing warmly through the windows. I slowed down, flipped on my turn signal, and started to pull in. And then I did the only thing I could think of. I floored it. The car lurched forward, tires screeching on the wet pavement as we shot toward the diner at nearly 60 mph. The sudden acceleration caught him off guard, throwing him back against the seat. The knife wavered away from my neck for just a second. "What the f—" he started, but I was already slamming on the brakes, cranking the wheel hard to the right. The car fishtailed wildly, tires screaming as we skidded across the wet parking lot. The world was a blur of motion and adrenaline. He lunged at me with the knife, but the momentum of the skid threw him against the passenger door. I felt a sharp pain as the blade caught my arm, slicing through my jacket and into my flesh. The car came to a sudden stop, nearly hitting a parked pickup truck. Without thinking, I unbuckled my seatbelt, threw open my door, and bolted. I could hear him shouting behind me, the sound of his door opening. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life, straight toward the diner's entrance. Rain pelted my face, mixing with the cold sweat of fear. My arm was bleeding, the cuts stinging in the cold air. I could hear footsteps splashing through puddles behind me. I reached the diner door and yanked it open, nearly falling inside. The warm air and smell of coffee hit me as I stumbled in, gasping for breath. "Help! He has a knife!" I shouted, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. The few patrons looked up in alarm. An elderly couple, a truck driver at the counter, a waitress frozen with a coffee pot in hand. And then I saw him, a uniformed police officer sitting in a corner booth, already rising to his feet, hand moving to his holster. I turned back toward the door just as the hitchhiker burst through it, knife raised. Our eyes met for a split second, and I saw surprise, then fury flash across his face as he registered the cop behind me. "Drop the knife! Police! Drop it now!" the officer shouted, gun already drawn, and pointed at the hitchhiker. Time seemed to stand still. For one horrible moment, I thought the guy was going to lunge at me anyway, get one final stab in before he was taken down. But then his eyes darted around the diner, calculating, and slowly he lowered the knife. "On the ground. Now," the officer ordered, advancing carefully, gun still trained on the hitchhiker. The guy complied, dropping to his knees, then lying face down on the linoleum floor. The knife clattered beside him. The officer was on him in seconds, kicking the knife away. knee in the hitchhiker's back as he cuffed him. I stood there shaking, blood dripping down my arm onto the floor. The waitress rushed over with a clean towel, pressing it against my wound. I barely felt it. I couldn't take my eyes off the hitchhiker as the officer hauled him to his feet. As they passed me, he looked right at me and smiled, not a normal smile, something twisted and wrong that made my skin crawl. "See you soon, Liam," he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. The next few hours were a blur. More police arrived. I gave a statement, an ambulance came, and a paramedic stitched up my arm. 13 stitches. They told me I was lucky. The cut was deep, but had missed anything important. Lucky. That's what everyone kept saying. Lucky the officer happened to be there. Lucky I managed to get away. Lucky the knife didn't hit an artery. It wasn't until later, after I'd been cleared to go home, that the officer who'd been first on the scene pulled me aside. "There's something you should know," he said quietly. "We ran his prints. This guy's wanted in connection with 3 murders in Washington state. All drivers who picked him up hitchhiking." I felt sick. "What happened to them?" The officer hesitated. "They were found in remote areas, throats cut, wallets empty." He paused. "He kept trophies, personal items from each victim." I remembered the backpack. "Did you find anything of mine?" The officer nodded grimly. "He had your business card. Must have taken it from your wallet while you were driving. Had your home address circled on it." The realization hit me like a physical blow. He'd been planning to kill me from the moment he got in my car. He already knew who I was, where I lived. I wasn't randomly picked. I was chosen. That was 2 weeks ago. They tell me he's locked up awaiting trial, that he can't hurt me. But I can't shake his words. "See you soon, Liam." Like he knew something I didn't. I moved out of my apartment the next day. I'm staying with a friend now. I bought a gun. I check the locks 3-4 times a night. I don't drive after dark anymore. And I keep seeing his face. That empty stare. That twisted smile. Sometimes I wake up convinced he's standing over my bed, knife in hand. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again. All because I stopped to help someone in the rain. If you're driving at night and see a hitchhiker, just keep going. No matter how harmless they look, no matter how bad the weather is, just drive. Because some decisions can't be undone, and some people aren't looking for a ride, they're looking for you. I swear to God, what happened to me in Willow Creek 2 weeks ago still gives me nightmares. I can't sleep without checking my doors 3 times, and I jump at every sound outside my window. I've been debating whether to even share this because I'm still terrified these people might somehow find me. But I need to get this off my chest. I was driving back from visiting my cousin in Northern California. My GPS died about an hour into my return trip, but I figured I knew the general direction well enough. Big mistake. The rain started coming down so hard I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. I mean absolutely pouring. The kind where your wipers can't keep up even at full speed. I must have missed my turn somewhere because nothing looked familiar anymore. The highway turned into a 2-lane road, then into something barely paved. I tried turning around a couple times, but each shortcut I took just got me more lost. The trees kept getting thicker, the road narrower. My phone had 0 bars, completely useless. By this point, it was getting dark, which made everything 10 times worse. I was low on gas, in the middle of nowhere, during the worst storm I'd seen in years. Every few minutes, my tires would slip in the mud, and my heart would drop, thinking I was about to get stuck. The road, if you could even call it that, eventually narrowed to basically a dirt path. Branches scraped against my car windows like fingernails. I was sweating despite the cold, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I kept telling myself I'd see a gas station or a main road any minute now. Then my headlights caught something that made me slam on my brakes. At first, I thought it was deer or something crossing the road. But no, it was people, moving between the trees about 30 yards ahead. I couldn't make out much through the rain, but I could tell they were carrying something long, maybe tools. My stomach dropped when I realized they were probably rifles. For a second, I considered backing up and finding another way out, but I was on a path so narrow there was no way to turn around. Going backward in that mud for who knows how many miles seemed impossible, so I just sat there, engine idling, watching these shadows move. Then they stopped and turned toward me. I don't know if they heard my car or saw my headlights, but suddenly I was their focus. I couldn't move. My body literally wouldn't respond. They started walking toward me, 5 or 6 figures emerging from the woods, moving with purpose. As they got closer, I could finally see them clearly through my rain-streaked windshield. Men in worn jackets and caps soaked from the rain. And yes, rifles. Most of them had rifles, either in their hands or slung over their shoulders. They didn't look like hunters. Hunters don't move like that, don't look at you like that. The tallest one moved to the front of my car, staring directly at me through the windshield. His beard was thick and wild, eyes narrowed against the rain. The others spread out, surrounding my car. I was trapped. My window was cracked open about an inch for air. The tall one approached my driver's side door and leaned down. Water dripped from his beard onto my window as he peered in at me. "You lost, boy?" he asked. His voice was deep, gravelly, not friendly. My mouth was so dry I could barely speak. Yeah, just trying to get back to the highway. My GPS died." He didn't respond right away, just kept staring at me. I noticed his hand resting on what looked like a hunting knife at his belt. "Don't get many visitors down this way," he finally said, "especially not at night, in a storm." Another man, shorter with a scar across his cheek, walked up behind him. "Ask him what he's really doing here, Dale." The tall one, Dale, didn't take his eyes off me. "Good question. What are you really doing here? These are private roads." My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. "I swear to God I'm just lost. I took a wrong turn somewhere back by Wilson Creek Road. I'm just trying to get home." "Wilson Creek is 30 miles back," a third man said. This one was older, maybe in his 60s, with a face like weathered leather. "You took a hell of a lot of wrong turns to end up here." I didn't know what to say to that. He was right. How had I gotten so far off track? Dale leaned in closer. I could smell tobacco and something else on his breath. "What's in the trunk?" "Nothing, just some bags, clothes. I was visiting my cousin up north." "Open it," he said. For a second I considered refusing, but one look at their faces, at the rifles, and I knew that wasn't an option. With shaking hands, I turned off the engine and popped the trunk. I moved to get out, but Dale put a heavy hand on my door. "Stay put." 2 of the men went to check my trunk. I watched in the rearview mirror as they rifled through my duffel bag and backpack. One of them held up my laptop case. "He's got a computer," he called out. Dale's eyes narrowed further. "Why would you need a computer out here?" It's just mine. From home. I was stammering like an idiot. The rain pounded on the roof of my car. Another man was circling around, looking in my windows, shining a flashlight across my back seat. I had nothing to hide, but the invasion made me feel sick with fear. The short guy with the scar leaned in toward Dale. Could be a Fed, or working for them developers trying to buy up land. Dale nodded slightly. "Could be. I'm not, I said quickly, too loudly. I'm an accountant from Sacramento. I was just visiting family. Please, I don't even know where I am right now. Willow Creek territory, Dale said. Though you won't find it on any map, not the real Willow Creek. The men had finished searching my trunk and were now conferring in low voices behind my car. I couldn't hear what they were saying over the rain, but their body language was tense, aggressive. Dale straightened up and looked back at them, then at me again. Step out of the car. My stomach dropped through the floor. Why? I haven't done anything. Step out now, or we'll help you out. With no choice, I unbuckled my seatbelt and opened the door. The rain immediately soaked through my clothes as I stood there, legs shaking so bad I worried I might collapse. These men were all bigger than me, rougher. The kind of men who worked with their hands, who lived hard lives. I felt pathetically soft in comparison. They made me empty my pockets, keys, wallet, phone. Dale looked through my wallet, examining my driver's license. Sacramento, huh? He looked at me skeptically. Long way from home. Like I said, I was visiting family. The older man picked up my phone, pressing the power button. No signal out here, he said, almost amused. Never is. Dale handed my license to the man with the scar, who studied it closely. Says his name is Nathan Parker. That your real name? Dale asked. Yes, why would I lie about that? Dale ignored my question. What do you do for the government, Nathan Parker? Nothing. I'm an accountant for a private firm, Reynolds and Associates. Look, you can call them, verify. I stopped, realizing how stupid that sounded. There was no cell service, and it was nearly 9 p.m. The men exchanged glances. Something passed between them, some unspoken communication. The atmosphere shifted slightly, but not in a way that made me feel any safer. You picked the wrong road to get lost on, the older man said. Dale gestured to two of the others. Check his car again, thoroughly. They began a more detailed search, opening the glove compartment, looking under seats. One of them unscrewed my dome light, checking inside it. They were looking for something specific, I realized. Bugs, tracking devices. I'm not whatever you think I am, I said, rain running down my face. Please, just point me back to the main road and I'll go. I won't ever come back here. Dale studied me for what felt like forever. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead, but he seemed unbothered by it, like a man who'd spent his life outdoors in all conditions. You know what happens to people who come snooping around here? He asked quietly. I shook my head, unable to speak. They don't leave. My legs nearly gave out then. I genuinely thought I was going to die right there in those woods. I imagined them burying my body somewhere no one would ever find it. My parents would never know what happened to me. My girlfriend would think I'd just abandoned her. The men searching my car came back. Nothing, one of them reported, just regular stuff. Dale nodded slowly. He seemed to be considering something, weighing options. Please, I whispered, I swear on my life I'm just lost. The older man stepped closer to Dale. Storm's getting worse. Creek's probably rising. We should get back. They all turned at a sound from further up the path. Headlights approaching. Another vehicle was coming, moving slowly through the mud and rain. It stopped about 20 yards away, its high beams illuminating all of us in harsh white light. A new tension rippled through the group. Even Dale straightened up slightly. The driver's door of the vehicle opened, and a figure stepped out, backlit by the headlights. As the person approached, I could make out a tall, lean man in a long raincoat. Unlike the others, he moved with a kind of deliberate grace. The group parted for him without a word. When he reached us, I could finally see his face. He was older than the rest, probably in his 70s, with white hair cut short and eyes so pale blue they seemed to glow in the darkness. There was something unsettling about his gaze, too intense, too focused. "What's happening here, Dale?" His voice was surprisingly soft, but carried an unmistakable authority. Dale gestured to me. "Found him driving up the back way. Says he's lost." The older man turned those pale eyes on me. I felt like he was looking right through me, seeing everything. "Is that true? You're lost?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I answered immediately, instinctively sensing this was someone who expected respect. "I've been trying to get back to the highway for hours." He studied me for several long moments. I held my breath. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nathan Parker." "You're a long way from anywhere, Nathan Parker." "I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trespass." He tilted his head slightly. "Are you carrying a weapon, Nathan?" "No, sir." He nodded to Dale, who patted me down roughly, confirming I was unarmed. The older man looked at my car, then back at me. Something in his expression shifted subtly. "Let him go," he said quietly. There was an immediate reaction from the others, shifting feet, exchanged glances. The scarred man started to say something, but a single look from the white-haired man silenced him. "But sir," Dale began. I said, "Let him go." The old man's voice hadn't changed in volume, but there was a steel in it now that brooked no argument. "He's nothing, just a fool who took a wrong turn." Dale stepped back immediately. "Yes, sir." The white-haired man turned to me. "You'll follow this road back the way you came. At the split oak, take the left fork. It'll lead you to County Road 16. From there you can find your way to the highway." Relief washed over me so intensely I nearly collapsed. Thank you so much." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. "If you ever find yourself on this road again, Nathan Parker, I won't be so generous. Do you understand me?" I nodded frantically. "Yes, I understand. I'll never come back." "Good." He stepped back. "Now go." I didn't need to be told twice. I gathered my things with trembling hands and practically dove back into my car. The engine started on the first try, which felt like a miracle. Through my windshield, I could see them all watching me. The group of armed men and their white-haired leader, standing in the rain like some kind of backwoods tribunal. I carefully turned my car around, tires spinning slightly in the mud. As I drove away, I kept glancing in my rearview mirror. They stood there watching until I rounded a bend and lost sight of them. Finding that split oak was the most stressful part of my life. I was terrified I'd miss it and end up deeper in their territory. When I finally saw it, a massive oak tree that had split down the middle but continued growing in two directions, I nearly cried with relief. The left fork, as promised, eventually led to a wider gravel road, then to County Road 16, and finally to blessed, beautiful Highway 99. I drove non-stop all the way home, constantly checking my mirrors, convinced they were following me somehow. I've looked up Willow Creek since then. The official town is a small, normal place known for Bigfoot sightings and marijuana farms. But I don't think that's where I was. I think I stumbled onto something else, some hidden community that doesn't want to be found. I still don't know who those people were or what they were protecting. Some kind of illegal operation? A separatist compound? I don't know, and I never want to find out. What I do know is that white-haired man saved my life. The others would have hurt me, or worse, if he hadn't shown up. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night seeing those pale blue eyes staring at me, hearing that soft voice saying, "If you ever find yourself on this road again." I've thrown away my GPS and bought physical maps for every trip I take now. and I never ever take shortcuts anymore. Some wrong turns can't be undone. I still can't sleep properly. It's been 3 weeks since that night, but every time I close my eyes, I see those eyes staring back at me from the darkness. I need to write this down somewhere, even if no one believes me. Maybe putting it into words will help make sense of what happened, though I doubt anything ever will. 3 weeks ago, I was driving back from my cousin's wedding in Redfield, about 4 hours from home. I decided to take the scenic route through the countryside since the weather forecast looked clear, and honestly, I needed some time alone with my thoughts. My boyfriend and I had just broken up after 3 years together, and I wasn't exactly in a hurry to get back to an empty apartment. The first couple hours of the drive were peaceful, just me, some old playlists, and the golden sunset lighting up the hills. Then things changed, fast. Around 8 p.m., dark clouds rolled in out of nowhere. Within minutes, it went from light drizzle to the kind of rain that makes your windshield wipers useless no matter how fast they're going. Lightning flashed constantly, thunder right on top of it. I slowed down to maybe 15 mm/may, but even that felt dangerous. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. I don't know that area well. There's a long stretch of road with nothing but fields and woods for miles. My GPS kept cutting out because of the storm, and my phone showed 1 bar of service that kept disappearing. I was starting to panic a little, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. That's when my car started making this weird sputtering noise. The dashboard lights flickered and the engine jerked a couple times. I'm not a car person, but I knew something was wrong. Maybe water had gotten into something important. I pulled over to the side of the road, which was basically just a muddy shoulder at that point. I sat there for a while, debating what to do. The rain wasn't letting up. If anything, it was getting worse. I tried calling roadside assistance, but my phone couldn't connect. No signal at all now. That's when I saw it through the sheets of rain, a dark shape on a small hill maybe 100 yards from the road. A house. It looked old and somewhat run down even from that distance, but it was shelter. After another 10 minutes of hoping the storm would ease, it didn't. I made the decision to make a run for it. Maybe they had a phone. Maybe I could at least wait there until the worst passed. I grabbed my purse, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit me like a physical force, drenching me instantly. The wind nearly knocked me over as I struggled up the muddy hill toward the house. Lightning illuminated everything in harsh white flashes, making the whole world seem unreal. As I got closer, I could see the house better. It was definitely old, a Victorian-style farmhouse with peeling paint and shutters hanging at odd angles. In daylight, I probably would have thought twice about approaching it, but right then, all I cared about was getting out of the rain. The porch steps creaked under my feet, and I hesitated at the front door. Should I knock? The place looked abandoned, but what if someone lived there? I rapped my knuckles against the wood and waited, water dripping from my hair into my eyes. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Nothing. I tried the doorknob, not really expecting it to open, but it turned easily in my hand. The door swung inward with a long, drawn-out creak that sent a chill down my spine, despite how cold and wet I already was. "Hello?" I called out, stepping cautiously into the darkness. "Is anyone here? I'm sorry to intrude, but my car broke down in the storm." My voice seemed to be swallowed up by the darkness. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping it around what appeared to be an entrance hall. Old-fashioned wallpaper, faded and peeling in places, wooden floors that had seen better days, a staircase leading to an upper floor, doorways leading to other rooms, everything covered in a layer of dust. It was clearly abandoned, but strangely, not as abandoned as it should have been. There were no cobwebs, no small animal droppings, just dust and age, and it wasn't completely empty either. I could make out furniture shapes covered with sheets. The air inside was stale but dry and surprisingly warm compared to outside. I closed the door behind me, shutting out the howling wind and pounding rain. The sudden quiet was almost as startling as the storm had been. I whispered hello one more time, feeling silly but needing to be sure. No response, just the distant rumble of thunder and the occasional creak of the house settling. I moved further inside, my wet shoes leaving prints on the dusty floor. There was a sitting room to my right with sheet-covered furniture. I pulled back one of the sheets to reveal an antique sofa that looked uncomfortable but usable. At least I had somewhere to sit while I figured out what to do. I checked my phone again, still no signal. The battery was at 38%, and I knew I needed to conserve it. I turned off the flashlight and let my eyes adjust to the darkness, which wasn't complete thanks to the occasional lightning flashing through the windows. As I sat there on the edge of that old sofa, I started to feel not exactly comfortable, but less panicked. The house, for all its creepiness, felt like a sanctuary from the violence of the storm. I decided to check the other rooms for a landline phone, though I doubted I'd find one that worked. The kitchen was large and old-fashioned, with a wood-burning stove and a hand pump at the sink. Definitely no phone. There was a dining room with a long table and chairs, a small bathroom with a clawfoot tub, and another room that might have been a study. I was just about to head back to the sitting room when I felt something. Not a sound, not a movement, just a change in the air, like when you're alone in a room and suddenly you know you're not alone anymore. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I froze. "Hello?" I called out again, hating how small and shaky my voice sounded. Nothing. I told myself it was just nerves, just my imagination working overtime because of the creepy old house and the storm. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it intensified. I felt like I was being watched. I turned around slowly, shining my phone light around the room. Empty. Just me and the dust and the old furniture. But the feeling persisted. I decided to go back to the sitting room and wait out the storm there. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Of course, an old house would feel spooky during a thunderstorm. That's like the definition of spooky. But as I passed through the hallway, I swear I heard something. A soft sound, almost like fabric brushing against wood. I spun around, heart pounding. "Is someone there?" I called out, louder this time. "I'm not trying to trespass. My car broke down." The lightning flashed, illuminating the hallway for a split second. And in that flash, I thought I saw a shadow move at the end of the hall. Not the shadow of something moving. The shadow itself moved, detached from any object that could have cast it. I backed away, telling myself it was a trick of the light, just the lightning and the rain playing tricks on my eyes. But my body wasn't buying it. My heart raced, my palms sweated, my breath came in short gasps. I retreated to the sitting room, keeping my back to the wall. The storm still raged outside. I had no choice but to stay, at least until it calmed down enough for me to see where I was going. I sat back down on the sofa, but I couldn't relax. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every flash of lightning made me search the shadows for movement. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, I heard it. A whisper, so faint I almost missed it beneath the sound of the rain. Get out while you still can. I jumped to my feet, my phone falling to the floor with a clatter. Who's there? I shouted, fear making my voice crack. The whisper came again, from everywhere and nowhere at once. Get out! I lunged for my phone, grabbed it, and ran for the front door. I didn't care about the storm anymore. I'd rather drown in the rain than spend another second in that house. But as I reached the entrance hall, I heard something else, a low, rumbling growl from behind me. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't the house settling. It was alive. I turned around slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run. Don't look, just run. But I couldn't help it. I had to see. In the darkness at the top of the stairs stood a figure, hunched and distorted, its proportions all wrong. Too tall, too thin in some places, too wide in others. And its eyes, God, its eyes. They glowed in the darkness, not reflecting light like an animal's eyes, but producing their own pale, sickly light. I screamed. I couldn't help it. The scream tore from my throat as I fumbled with the door handle behind me. The figure moved, faster than anything should be able to move, descending the stairs in a blur of shadow. The door finally opened, and I threw myself out into the storm. The rain felt like needles on my skin, the wind like a physical blow, but I didn't care. I ran down those creaking porch steps, slipping in the mud as I struggled down the hill toward my car. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I was too afraid of what I might see following me. I reached my car, yanked the door open, and threw myself inside, locking the doors immediately. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I turned it, praying, begging the car to start. The engine turned over once, twice, then roared to life like there had never been a problem. I didn't question this miracle. I just slammed it into drive and hit the gas, skidding on the wet road before gaining traction. I drove through that storm recklessly fast, not caring about the danger. All I knew was that I needed to get as far away from that house as possible. I drove until the storm lessened, until I found a gas station with lights and people. I pulled in, still shaking, still soaked to the bone. The attendant asked if I was okay, and I mumbled something about hydroplaning and getting scared. I couldn't tell him the truth. He'd think I was crazy. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe the stress of the breakup, the wedding, the storm, all combined to make me hallucinate. Maybe it was just an old house creaking in a storm, and my imagination filled in the rest. But I know what I saw, I know what I felt, and I know I'm never driving that road again, no matter how long the detour. Sometimes at night, when I'm drifting off to sleep, I hear that whisper again. Get out while you still can. And I wonder if it was trying to warn me. I wonder if whatever lived in that house is still there, waiting for the next person to seek shelter from a storm. And sometimes, in the darkest part of night, I wonder if something followed me home. I still can't shake what happened to me in Ravenswood last month. I've tried talking to my therapist about it, tried explaining it to the police, even tried writing it down a dozen times, but the words never seemed to capture just how terrifying it actually was. I figured maybe sharing it here might help me process it, even though I doubt anyone will believe me. I barely believe it myself, and I lived through it. It was a Friday night, and I was driving back from a business conference in Charleston. I'd decided to take the scenic route home instead of the interstate, a decision I'll regret for the rest of my life. The rain started about an hour into my drive, just a light drizzle at first, but it quickly turned into one of those torrential downpours where your wipers can't keep up no matter how fast they're going. I remember checking my GPS and seeing I was about 20 miles outside of Ravenswood. The road was this narrow 2-lane stretch with nothing but dense forest on both sides. No street lights, no houses, no other cars, just me, my headlights, and sheets of rain hammering down on my windshield. The kind of isolation that doesn't bother you until something goes wrong. I slowed down to maybe 25 mph because visibility was so bad. I was leaning forward, squinting through the windshield, when I saw something in the road ahead. At first I thought it was a fallen tree or maybe a deer, but as I got closer, I realized it was people. A group of them, standing in the middle of the road, completely blocking my path. Even through the rain, I could tell something was off. They weren't moving out of the way, weren't trying to flag me down for help. They were just standing there. And they were wearing masks, not Halloween masks or ski masks. These looked handmade, crude things fashioned from burlap or canvas with misshapen eye holes. My first instinct was to reverse, but the road was too narrow to turn around quickly, and something told me I couldn't waste those precious seconds. So I laid on the horn, hoping they'd scatter, and hit the gas. That's when one of them stepped forward and threw something at my windshield. I heard a crack, then my windshield spider-webbed, and I instinctively swerved. My car fishtailed on the wet asphalt. I remember the horrible feeling of losing control, the steering wheel jerking in my hands as I slid toward the ditch. I hit the brakes, but it was too late. The car went sideways and stalled out, leaving me sideways across the road. Before I could restart the engine, they were at my car, 6 or 7 of them, surrounding me on all sides. One of them smashed my driver's side window with something heavy, a rock or maybe a hammer. Glass exploded inward, cutting my face and hands. I tried to shield myself, but another one of them reached in through the broken window and unlocked my door. I fought. God, I fought as hard as I could. I kicked and punched and screamed, but there were too many of them. They grabbed my arms and legs and literally dragged me out of the car into the pouring rain. Someone hit me in the stomach, and as I doubled over, gasping for breath, they wrestled my hands behind my back. I felt rough rope digging into my wrists as they bound them tight, so tight that my fingers immediately started to tingle from lost circulation. Someone yanked my head back by my hair and tied a cloth over my eyes. The blindfold was soaking wet from the rain, clinging to my face like a second skin. "What do you want?" I kept screaming. "I have money. Take my wallet. Take my car." But nobody answered me. All I could hear was their heavy breathing and occasional murmurs to each other that I couldn't make out over the rain. They half dragged, half carried me away from the road. I could feel the ground change beneath my feet, from asphalt to mud, then to uneven forest floor. Branches whipped at my face and body as they pushed me forward. I tripped over roots and rocks, falling several times, only to be roughly yanked back to my feet. I don't know how far we went. It felt like miles, but it was probably only a few hundred yards into the woods. Finally, they forced me down onto my knees. The ground was soaked, and immediately my pants absorbed the moisture, cold mud seeping through to my skin. Then, for the first time, one of them spoke directly to me. "Don't move." The voice was male, unnaturally deep, like they were disguising it. "Don't make a sound." I heard them walking away, their footsteps squishing in the mud, but they didn't go far, maybe 30 or 40 feet. I knelt there, rain pouring down on me, my clothes completely soaked through, shivering partly from cold, but mostly from pure terror. I could hear them talking among themselves, their voices low, but carrying just enough for me to catch fragments. "Wait until midnight. The others will be here soon. Just like the last one. He'll do fine for the offering." Offering. That word sent ice through my veins. These weren't just robbers or criminals. This was something else entirely, something ritualistic. I thought about every horror movie I'd ever seen, every news story about cults and killings in remote areas, and a new level of panic set in. I don't know how long I knelt there listening to them. Time lost all meaning. My knees ached, my wrists burned where the rope was cutting into them, and I was shaking uncontrollably from the cold. But beneath all that physical discomfort was a growing certainty that if I didn't get away, I was going to die in these woods. So I started working on the ropes, slowly, carefully, trying not to make any movements that would catch their attention. The rain was actually a blessing now. It masked any small sounds I made, and it had soaked the ropes, making them slightly more pliable. I twisted my wrists back and forth, ignoring the pain as the rough fibers tore at my skin. The whole time, I kept straining to hear their conversation, to gauge where they were and what they were planning. They mentioned a ceremony several times, and the chosen one who was apparently on their way. One of them seemed concerned about the time, saying they needed to prepare me before midnight. That's when I started working faster, desperation giving me new strength. I managed to get one hand partially free, enough to work my fingers against the knots. The rain had slackened somewhat, which meant I had to be even more careful not to make noise. It felt like hours before I finally worked my right hand free. My wrist was raw and bleeding, but I hardly noticed the pain. I carefully brought my hands around to the front, then reached up and pulled the blindfold off, blinking as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. I was in a small clearing in the woods. About 30 feet away, my captors stood in a loose circle, still wearing those disturbing masks. There were 7 of them, and in the dim light filtering through the trees, I could see they were wearing dark robes or coats that reached to the ground. One of them was drawing something in the mud with a stick, a circle with strange symbols around it. Between me and them was nothing but open space. To my right and left and behind me was dense forest. If I ran, they would see me immediately, but if I stayed, whatever they had planned for midnight would happen, and I was certain I wouldn't survive it. I had to take the chance. I quietly shifted from my knees to a crouching position, ready to sprint. I picked what looked like the densest part of the forest behind me, took one deep breath, and ran. I heard their shouts almost immediately. "He's loose! Get him! Don't let him reach the road!" I crashed through the underbrush, branches tearing at my face and clothes. I had no idea which direction the road was, but I knew I needed to put as much distance between me and them as possible. The forest floor was treacherous, slick with mud and rain, littered with fallen branches and hidden roots. I fell twice in the first minute, scrambling back to my feet with mud-covered hands, pushing myself forward on pure adrenaline. Behind me, I could hear them coming. They knew these woods better than I did, and they were gaining. One of them was frighteningly close. I could hear his labored breathing, the splash of his footsteps in the mud. A flashlight beam cut through the trees, sweeping back and forth, almost catching me. I ducked behind a large tree trunk, pressing my back against the rough bark, trying to control my breathing. The flashlight beam passed just to my left. I held perfectly still, not even daring to wipe the rain from my eyes. The footsteps slowed, and I knew my pursuer was listening, trying to locate me. For a terrible moment, I thought he had. The footsteps came closer, the light sweeping toward my hiding spot. But then a call came from somewhere deeper in the woods. "Over here! I think I see him!" And my pursuer turned away, his footsteps receding as he ran toward the voice. I gave myself 5 seconds, then took off in the opposite direction. I had no plan beyond away from the voices, away from the clearing, away from whatever sick ritual they had planned for me. My soaked clothes weighed me down, My shoes squelched with every step, but I kept going. I don't know how long I ran. It could have been 20 minutes or 2 hours. Time had no meaning anymore. My world had narrowed to the next step, the next breath, the constant vigilance for sounds of pursuit. Several times I thought I heard them behind me, and each time I changed direction, zigzagging through the forest like a hunted animal. When I finally broke through the tree line into a clearing, I almost cried with relief. Ahead, maybe half a mile away, I could see lights, street lights, house lights, civilization. I had no idea what town it was, but it represented safety, people, help. I sprinted across the field, slipping and falling in the mud, getting up again and again. My legs were on fire, my lungs burning, but I didn't slow down. I kept expecting to feel hands grabbing me from behind, pulling me back into the darkness. When my feet hit asphalt, I almost collapsed from sheer relief. It was a road, not the same one I'd been driving on, but a road nonetheless. I turned toward the lights and ran, staying on the shoulder, ready to flag down any car that passed. None did. It was the middle of the night in a rainstorm, and I was on some backcountry road that probably saw 10 cars a day. But those lights were getting closer, and that was all that mattered. I reached the outskirts of what turned out to be a small town just as my body gave out. My legs buckled, and I went down hard on the pavement, scraping my palms and knees. For a minute I just lay there in the rain, gasping for breath, my whole body trembling with exhaustion and leftover adrenaline. A porch light came on in a house across the street. An older man in a bathrobe came out, squinting at me through the rain. "Hey, you all right?" he called. I tried to answer but couldn't get the words out. He must have seen something in my face, though, because he came down his steps and across the street, helping me to my feet. "Jesus Christ, son, what happened to you?" he asked, taking in my mud-covered clothes, the blood on my wrists, the cuts on my face. I managed to choke out, "People in the woods. They took me, tried to." I didn't need to finish. He half carried me to his house, sat me on his porch, and called the police. The cops came, took my statement, drove me to the hospital where they treated the cuts on my wrists and gave me something for shock. They sent cars out to where I thought my car might be, but they couldn't find it. They searched the woods where I thought the clearing was, but found nothing. No signs of a ritual site, no evidence anyone had been there. They were skeptical, I could tell. They thought I'd crashed my car somewhere and wandered confused through the woods, making up the story about masked kidnappers to explain my injuries. Or worse, that I was on drugs, hallucinating the whole thing. But I know what happened. I know what I saw, what I heard, what I felt. Those people in the masks were real. Whatever they had planned for me at midnight was real. And somewhere in the woods outside Ravenswood, they're still there, waiting for another car to come down that lonely road in the rain. I don't drive back roads anymore. I don't drive at night if I can help it. I've moved to a new apartment with better security, and I'm seeing a therapist twice a week. But I still wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced I can hear them coming for me through the darkness. And I still don't know why they chose me, or what would have happened if I hadn't gotten away before midnight. I still can't sleep through thunderstorms. It's been 4 months since that night, but every time rain pounds against my windows, I'm right back there, trapped, hunted, and certain I was going to die. It happened back in October when I was driving back from visiting my brother in Haddonville. I should have just stayed the night at his place like he suggested, but I had a morning shift at the warehouse I couldn't miss. The weather forecast mentioned scattered showers, nothing major. Boy, were they wrong. About an hour into my drive home, the sky just opened up. I'm talking biblical level downpour. My windshield wipers couldn't keep up, even at their highest setting. The road through Blackthorn Hollow is already sketchy on a good day. No streetlights, tight curves, lots of deer. In that storm, it was a death trap. I was white-knuckling the steering wheel, leaning forward like that would somehow help me see better, when I nearly missed a curve. My tires caught the gravel on the shoulder, and I felt that sickening sensation of the car starting to hydroplane. Somehow, I managed to straighten out, but my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. That's when I decided I needed to pull over until the worst passed. The rain wasn't letting up, and driving felt like a suicide mission. Through the sheets of rain, I noticed what looked like a building set back from the road. As I got closer, I could make out the faded sign for a rest stop. It looked abandoned, not too surprising since they built the new highway bypass a few years back. I pulled into the cracked parking lot, killing my headlights, but keeping the engine running for a few minutes while I tried to calm down. The rain hammered against my roof like it was trying to get in. I checked my phone. No signal, of course. Blackthorn Hollow is notorious for dead zones. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. After about 15 minutes, it was clear the storm wasn't passing anytime soon. My gas gauge was getting low from idling, and the thought of being stranded on this road with an empty tank was worse than waiting out the storm in the abandoned building. So I grabbed my phone, useless as it was, stuffed it in my pocket, pulled my hoodie up, and made a run for the rest stop. The building was in worse shape than it looked from the road. The windows were boarded up with plywood that was starting to rot, and someone had spray painted all kinds of crap across the front. Gang signs, penises, the usual creative genius of bored teenagers. The main entrance had those old-school heavy glass doors, one hanging partially off its hinges. I hesitated at the entrance. Every horror movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind, but the alternative was sitting in my slowly freezing car for who knows how long. I pulled the working door open and stepped inside. The smell hit me first, that musty, damp odor of a place that's been abandoned and left to rot. My eyes took a moment to adjust to the darkness. What little light there was came from the night sky, through gaps in the boarded windows, and a few holes in the ceiling where rain was dripping through. I used my phone flashlight to look around. The main area was mostly empty, except for some toppled trash cans, broken chairs, and what might have once been a vending machine now laying on its side. Graffiti covered pretty much every wall. The floor was littered with fast food wrappers, empty beer cans, and cigarette butts. Obviously, people still came here, just not for its intended purpose. I found a relatively dry spot against a wall and sat down, figuring I'd wait out the worst of the storm. The rain continued to pound against the roof, and water dripped rhythmically through the ceiling in at least 3 different spots I could see. I tried my phone again. Still no signal. That's when I heard it. At first I thought it was just the building creaking in the wind or water running through old pipes, but then it became clearer. Voices. Actual human voices coming from somewhere deeper in the building. My first thought was relief. Other people stranded by the storm, maybe? My second thought was more cautious. This wasn't exactly the kind of place normal people hung out, especially at midnight during a storm. I stood up slowly, debating whether to announce my presence or just wait quietly until morning. Curiosity got the better of me. Using my phone light, keeping it dimmed and pointed downward, I moved toward the sounds, past what used to be restrooms, toward what I guessed was once the building's back office or storage area. The voices grew louder, men's voices, maybe 3 or 4 different people. They were talking in low tones, occasionally punctuated by a laugh or a curse. I couldn't make out exactly what they were saying, but something about their tone made me uneasy. I came to a hallway with a door at the end that was slightly ajar, yellow light spilling out from inside. The voices were definitely coming from there. I moved closer, trying to step lightly on the debris-covered floor. I just wanted to see who was there, figure out if they were harmless or if I needed to get back to my car. I was about 10 feet from the door when my foot came down on something that cracked loudly, probably a plastic bottle or something. The voices inside immediately went silent. My heart jumped into my throat. I froze, not even daring to breathe. For a second, I thought maybe they hadn't heard me after all. Then the door swung all the way open. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by what looked like a lantern or camping light behind him. He was tall and gaunt, wearing layers of dirty clothes. His face was half hidden by a wild beard, but I could see his eyes narrow as he peered into the darkness of the hallway. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice raspy and hostile. I considered running, but now that the door was open, I could see past him into the room. There were 4 others inside, sitting in a rough circle on the floor. They had what looked like sleeping bags and backpacks. Clearly they'd been staying here. But what made my blood run cold was what I saw in one man's hand, a knife with a blade that caught the yellow light as he turned it over in his fingers. I'm sorry," I stammered, stepping back. "My car, the storm, I just needed shelter." The man in the doorway stepped into the hall. "How long you been standing there?" His hand moved to his pocket, and I was terrified he was reaching for a weapon. "Just got here," I said, continuing to back up. "I'll go. I didn't mean to bother anyone." Another man appeared behind the first one. He was shorter but thicker, with a face that looked like it had seen too many fights. "What's going on, Ricky?" he asked, then spotted me. "Who the fuck is this?" "Says he's just looking for shelter," the first man, Ricky, replied, not taking his eyes off me. "Bullshit," the second man spat. "Nobody just happens on this place. You a cop?" No, I swear. My car almost went off the road in the storm. I just needed somewhere dry until it passes." I was almost at the end of the hallway now, ready to bolt back to the main area. A third man pushed his way forward, the one with the knife. He was younger than the others, maybe in his 20s, with a twitchy energy that scared me more than the older men's suspicion. "Maybe he saw us from the road," Knife Guy said, his voice unnervingly calm. "Maybe he knows what we got in there." I had no idea what he was talking about, but I knew I was in serious danger. These weren't just homeless people seeking shelter. There was something else going on here. "Look, I don't know anything about you guys or what you've got. I swear I'm just passing through." My back hit the wall at the end of the hallway. I'd run out of room to retreat. Ricky took another step toward me. "Empty your pockets, slowly." I didn't argue. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone, car keys, and wallet. "Toss them here," he ordered. I did as he said, my wallet and keys landing at his feet. My phone clattered a bit further away. As Ricky bent to pick them up, Knife Guy suddenly lunged forward with a growl, slashing at the air between us. "This is taking too long," he snarled. "He's seen us. He's seen the stuff." I didn't wait to find out what the stuff was. I bolted, turning and sprinting back through the main area toward the entrance. Behind me, I heard shouting and the thunder of footsteps. "Get him!" someone yelled. "Don't let him get to the road." Terror gave me speed I didn't know I had. I knocked over a trash can behind me, hoping it would slow them down. The entrance was just ahead, that broken glass door my only way out. I slammed into it with my shoulder, bursting out into the pouring rain. The parking lot was a sheet of water, and I slipped immediately. going down hard on one knee. Pain shot up my leg, but adrenaline pushed me back up. My car was maybe 30 yards away, but it felt like miles. I heard the door bang open behind me. Glancing back, I saw silhouettes pouring out of the building. One of them, I think it was Knife Guy, was gaining on me fast. I reached my car and fumbled with the keys, my wet hands slipping on the fob. The locks clicked open and I threw myself inside, locking the doors immediately. As I jammed the key into the ignition, a face appeared at my window. The second man, the fighter, his features contorted with rage. He pounded on the glass with his fist. The engine roared to life. I threw the car into reverse, then drive, not even looking as I peeled out of the parking lot. My tires sprayed gravel and water. In my rearview mirror, I could see them standing in the rain, watching me go. Knife Guy was pointing after me, saying something to the others. I hit the main road doing at least 50, the car fishtailing in the rain. I didn't slow down for at least 10 miles, constantly checking my mirrors for headlights behind me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. When I finally reached an area with cell service, I pulled over and called 911. I was still shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I told them what happened, where the rest stop was, about the men and the knife. The dispatcher said they'd send officers to check it out, but I could tell from her tone she wasn't treating it as a high priority. Probably thought I was some drunk guy who got spooked by homeless people. I drove straight to the nearest police station anyway and gave a statement. The officer who took my report seemed skeptical, especially when I mentioned that the men seemed to be hiding something. He said they'd look into it, but it would probably be morning before anyone could get out there because of the storm. I didn't go home that night. I checked into a motel near the police station, too afraid those men might somehow find me. I didn't even have my wallet. Ricky had taken it. But the night clerk took pity on me after seeing my condition and the mud all over my clothes. The next morning, an officer called to tell me they'd checked out the rest stop. There was evidence people had been staying there, but no sign of anyone now. They'd cleared out completely. The officer asked if I wanted to come identify any of the items they found, but I refused. I just wanted my wallet back if they found it. They never did. It's been 4 months, and sometimes I still think I see Knife Guy in crowds or Ricky watching me from a parked car. I've taken a different route to my brother's place ever since, even though it adds 40 minutes to the drive. I got a new wallet, canceled all my cards, changed the locks on my apartment, even though they never saw my address. But the worst part is not knowing who they were or what they were hiding. Not knowing if they were just scared I'd report their squatting, or if it was something worse. Not knowing if they're still out there, remembering my face. I still can't sleep when it rains. I've been debating whether to share this for months. I still get nightmares about it. Even typing this makes my hands shake. But I need to get it out there. Maybe someone will recognize this man's description or his methods. Maybe I can stop this from happening to someone else. This happened back in April, during those massive spring storms that hit the Midwest. I was driving back from visiting my sister in Cedar Rapids. I live in Maplewood, about a 3-hour drive in good conditions. The weather forecast mentioned scattered showers, but nothing serious, so I figured I'd be fine taking the scenic route home. It was around 6 p.m. when I left her place. I should mention I drive a small Honda Civic. Great on gas, terrible for anything remotely off-road. The rain started about an hour into my drive. Just drizzling at first, but it kept getting worse. I tried to find a main highway, but my GPS kept losing signal, and I ended up on these backcountry roads I didn't recognize. By 8 p.m. it was pouring so hard I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. The windshield wipers were going full blast, but doing almost nothing. I slowed down to maybe 15 mph, just crawling along, trying to find any sign or landmark. That's when I noticed the water was getting deeper on the road. Not just puddles, but actual standing water that was getting higher. I tried turning around, but the road was narrow with ditches on both sides. When I attempted a three-point turn, my front wheels just slid off the edge of the asphalt. I hit the gas, trying to power out, but that just made it worse. The tires spun, and I felt the car sink deeper. I'll never forget that feeling of panic when I realized I was stuck. The water was already up to the bottom of my doors and rising fast. My phone showed no service, not even a single bar. It was pitch black outside, except for my headlights reflecting off the rain. I couldn't even see where the road ended and the fields began anymore. Everything was just water. I tried calling 911 anyway, but nothing went through. I remember sitting there, engine still running, watching the water level rise inch by inch up my car door. I had this horrible vision of the water reaching the windows, filling up the car, and me trapped inside. I actually started hyperventilating. That's when I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. I can't explain the relief I felt. I immediately hit my hazards to signal I needed help. The vehicle, a pickup truck I could see now, stopped maybe 30 feet behind me. The high beams were blinding, and I couldn't make out much detail. A man approached my car with a flashlight. He was wearing a yellow rain poncho, which made him look like some kind of weird glowing figure in the darkness. I rolled down my window just a crack. "You're in a bad spot here, miss," he said. His voice was deep, with a slight accent I couldn't place. Maybe Southern? "This whole area's flooding. Creeks overflowed about a mile back." I explained I was lost and asked if he could call for a tow truck. He shined his flashlight around at the rising water and shook his head. "No tow truck's gonna come out in this. Water's rising too fast anyway. You need to get out of the car now." When he moved his flashlight away from my eyes, I got my first good look at him. He was maybe in his 50s, with this weathered face, like someone who'd spent their life working outdoors. Gray stubble, deep creases around his eyes. He wasn't particularly big or intimidating, actually kind of average build, but something about him made me uneasy. Maybe it was how calm he seemed in the middle of a flash flood. I hesitated. Every safety lesson I'd ever learned told me not to go with strangers, but the water was now halfway up my door. What choice did I have? "I can give you a ride into town," he offered. "Nearest place with a phone is about 20 minutes away. Can't stay here, though. Not safe." I glanced at the water again. It had risen another inch just while we were talking. "Okay," I said. "Let me grab my purse." I grabbed my phone, purse, and the emergency kit my dad had insisted I keep in the glove compartment. The man held out his hand to help me out of the car. I had to open the door against the pressure of the water, which was surprisingly difficult. The moment my feet hit the water, I gasped. It was freezing cold and already up to my knees, with a current strong enough that I had to fight to keep my balance. The man gripped my arm firmly, too firmly, and guided me toward his truck. I was soaked and shivering by the time we reached it. It was an older model pickup, maybe from the 90s, dark blue or black, covered in mud. The interior smelled like cigarettes and something else I couldn't identify, something musty and unpleasant. "Name's Ray," he said, starting the engine. I told him my name was Sophia. "Thank you for stopping," I said, trying to sound grateful despite my unease. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." He just nodded and started driving. I noticed he didn't turn around. He just continued forward, through the water, which his truck was high enough to handle. Shouldn't we go back the way you came? I asked. Since that road must be clear? Nope. Bridge is out that way. Have to go around. That's when I realized I had no idea where we were or where he was taking me. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check for signal, but really, I was turning on my location sharing and trying to send an SOS text to my sister. Of course, nothing went through, but I hoped if I got signal later, it would send automatically. We drove in silence for a while. The rain continued to pour down, and the windshield wipers squeaked rhythmically. I kept watching for road signs or landmarks, anything I could use to figure out where we were, but it was too dark to see much beyond the headlights. After about 30 minutes, not the 20 he'd promised, I started getting really worried. We should have reached some kind of town by now. The roads were getting narrower, more winding. I hadn't seen another car or house for at least 15 minutes. How much further? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Not far now, Ray said, with this smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was just a slight upward turn of his mouth, but something about it made my skin crawl. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. Do you live around here? I asked, hoping to get some information. You could say that. Where exactly are we heading? Place where you'll be safe. His answers were getting vaguer, and that knot in my stomach was getting tighter. I tried to memorize his face, just in case. The deep-set eyes, the scar above his right eyebrow, the yellowing teeth when he smiled. We turned onto yet another road, this one even smaller than the last. The trees were closing in on both sides, branches scraping against the truck. I hadn't seen a street sign in ages. I think I should call my boyfriend, I lied. He's probably worried by now. Does your phone have service? Ray glanced at me. No phones where we're going. That's when I knew with absolute certainty that I was in danger. This man had no intention of taking me to town. We'd been driving for almost an hour now, in what felt like circles, getting deeper into nowhere. I subtly checked that my door was unlocked and tried to come up with a plan. Jump out at the next stop? Try to grab the wheel? I had nothing to use as a weapon except my keys. The truck slowed as we approached a turn, and I tensed, ready to make a move. But we just continued on, now on what was barely even a road, more like 2 dirt tracks through the woods. Where are we? I demanded, dropping the pretense of politeness. Ray didn't answer. He just kept driving, that same unsettling half-smile on his face. I want you to take me to the nearest town right now, I said, trying to sound authoritative despite my fear. Almost there, he said. His voice had changed somehow, harder, colder. The fear was becoming unbearable. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. My hands were shaking and I was fighting back tears. I tried to memorize every turn we took, but I was completely disoriented by now. Then he said something that made my blood freeze. You remind me of the last one. She was pretty too. I think I stopped breathing for a second. The last one? There were others before me? The truck was moving slower now, navigating the rough terrain. The rain had eased somewhat, but the night was pitch black around us. No moon, no stars, just darkness beyond the headlights. Please, I whispered. My family is expecting me. They know where I am. Ray laughed. It was a horrible sound. No, they don't. I was right. He'd been driving in circles, taking random turns to confuse me. We probably weren't even that far from where he'd picked me up, just deep in some woods where no one would hear me scream. The truck slowed even more as we approached what looked like a clearing ahead. I could see open space beyond the trees and what might have been lights in the far distance. That's when I knew it was now or never. As soon as the truck slowed to make the turn into the clearing, I grabbed the door handle, threw it open, and launched myself out into the darkness. I landed hard on my side, pain shooting through my shoulder and hip, but adrenaline propelled me to my feet. I heard Ray shouting behind me, the truck door slamming. I ran like I've never run before. Into the trees, away from the clearing, toward what I hoped were distant lights. Branches whipped at my face, roots tried to trip me, but I didn't slow down. I could hear him crashing through the woods behind me, swearing, getting closer. I changed direction, weaving between trees, trying to lose him. The rain had made the ground slippery, and I fell twice, scraping my palms and knees, but I got up immediately. All I could think was that if he caught me, I would die. His flashlight beams swept through the trees, sometimes catching me for a heart-stopping moment before I could duck behind something. I could hear him breathing now, heavy and angry. He wasn't calling out anymore. That was somehow worse. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. My lungs were burning, my legs weak. But then I saw it. The trees were thinning, and through them I could see actual streetlights. A road, civilization. With one final burst of energy, I broke through the tree line. I was on the outskirts of a small town. There was a gas station just down the road, its fluorescent lights like a beacon. I didn't stop running until I reached it, collapsing against the door, startling the attendant inside. I was soaked, covered in mud and scratches, hyperventilating. They called the police. I tried to explain what happened, but I was so hysterical they could barely understand me. By the time the officers arrived and I could tell them what happened, Ray was long gone. They found my car the next day, completely submerged. They searched the area where I said the man had taken me, but there was no sign of him or his truck. The officer suggested that maybe he really was just trying to help and got scared when I jumped out and ran. That maybe I'd misinterpreted things because of the stress. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. That wasn't a good Samaritan. That was someone who had done this before and would do it again. It's been 4 months, and the police still haven't found him. Sometimes I think I see his truck in my rearview mirror or his face in a crowd, and I panic. I've moved to a different town, changed my number. I don't drive on back roads anymore, and I never go out when it's raining. I don't know who Ray really was or what would have happened if I hadn't escaped, but I know I almost became one of those people who just disappear without a trace. One of those missing persons cases that never get solved. So this is a warning. If you're ever stranded and someone offers help, trust your instincts, because sometimes the danger isn't the situation you're in. It's the person who shows up to save you.